Thank you so much for supporting the channel True Horror Stories in the RV. If you enjoy real scary tales from the road, don't forget to like this video and subscribe so you won't miss the next chilling journey. Also, drop a comment to let me know where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now, or even suggest a spooky topic you'd like to see in the next video.
I've been traveling solo across the Southwest for months, chasing that sense of peace only the wild could offer. Arizona was next on my list. The towering pines of the high desert called to me more than the red rocks or tourist traps. I'd read about a secluded RV campsite just outside the Navajo Nation, tucked away in a stretch of forest the locals called Canyon Pines. No hookups, no cell service, just me, the trees, and the wind. It was late October when I arrived, and the air carried that heavy stillness unique to the shoulder season. Too cold for most campers, too early for snow. The dirt road that led to the site was barely maintained, lined with skeletal trees that had begun shedding their bark. My GPS had already died 10 miles back, and the last road sign I saw was warped beyond legibility. When I pulled into the clearing where I planned to set up, the first thing I noticed was how quiet it was. No birds, no rustling leaves, just an oppressive silence that seemed to soak into the RV's frame. I parked beneath a cluster of ancient pines and stepped out, boots crunching dry needles. To the east, the ground sloped gently toward a gulch filled with low shrubs and jagged boulders. Beyond that, nothing but forest. That evening, just as the sun was bleeding into the mountains, I decided to hike a short loop trail that ran along the canyon rim. About halfway through, I saw something strange, a tall pine with long, deep gouges carved down its bark, almost like claws. At its base were symbols etched into the dirt, spirals and triangles, and the remains of what looked like a small animal skull surrounded by ash. I backed away quickly. Some kind of offering, I thought, maybe from a local ceremony or a prank by hikers. Still, I marked the location on my map and returned to camp uneasy. When I got back, a pickup truck had pulled into the site across the clearing. A man stood outside it, lean and weathered, wearing a faded ranger's uniform. I called out to greet him, but he didn't wave, just watched me motionless, as if sizing me up. "Evening," I offered. He finally nodded. "You alone?" "Yeah, just passing through. Thought this place might be quiet." "It is," he said flatly. "Too quiet, some would say." I laughed awkwardly. "You patrol this area often?" "I don't patrol here," he replied. "No one does. Not anymore." Something about his tone made my stomach twist. "You planning to stay long? Just a night or two?" He looked at the setting sun. "Leave before dark. Don't let it get too quiet, you understand?" I opened my mouth to respond, but he was already turning back toward his truck. As the engine roared and he drove away, dust curling up behind his tires, I realized I hadn't seen a badge on his shirt. No radio, no sidearm. I didn't see him again. That night, I made a fire and cooked a simple meal. As I sat with my back to the RV, I listened for the chirp of crickets or the cry of an owl, anything. But it was as if the world had pressed mute. The fire flickered lower and I tossed on another log. That's when I heard it. A low, rasping whisper, so faint I thought it might have been wind, coming from the direction of the gulch. It didn't form words at first, just a breath-like sound. Then it grew clearer. My name, twice, whispered low and slow. I stood up fast, nearly knocking over my chair. Flashlight in hand, I scanned the trees, the slope of the canyon, the edge of my firelight. Nothing, no movement. "Hello?" I called. "Is someone out there?" Silence. I backed into the RV, locked the door, and drew the blinds. Inside, the heater ticked and clicked as it warmed the air block, but every other sound was muffled by that unnatural hush outside. I climbed into bed, but left my boots on. Could have been a hiker, or maybe the ranger messing with me, or maybe not. Later that night, I awoke to a soft thump. Something had brushed against the side of the RV. I held my breath, another thump. Then the unmistakable sound of footsteps circling slowly around the vehicle. I peeked through a sliver in the blind, but saw nothing. Then a low voice, gravelly and too deep, spoke directly outside the door. "Let me in. I'm hurt." I didn't move. The voice again. "Please, it's cold." Whoever it was, they hadn't knocked. I stayed silent, still, waiting. Then the voice shifted. "I'm you." The footsteps faded. The silence returned. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. By morning, I found a long, pale handprint smeared across the passenger side window. I hadn't touched that side in days. By mid-morning, the world felt normal again. Sunlight streamed through the trees. Birds had returned, at least one or two. I told myself I'd imagined everything from the night before. Maybe it had been a dream brought on by isolation or the mind playing tricks when wrapped too tightly in silence. Still, I kept glancing over my shoulder. I checked the passenger side window. The handprint was gone. That made it worse. I walked the perimeter of the campsite. There were faint depressions in the dirt, like where someone had stood, but not boot prints. More like bare feet, only longer, wider. Whatever had walked around my RV hadn't been wearing shoes. I knelt to study one of the prints more closely and felt a tremor run up my spine. The big toe was oddly positioned, almost off to the side, and the arch of the foot was too deep, too high. It looked human, mostly, but not quite. I erased the prints with my boot and tried not to think about them. Later, I decided to hike a different trail, something that might get my mind off things. This one wound toward a bluff that overlooked the gulch, then bent through a stretch of forest thicker than the last. The air was cooler under the canopy, and the light filtered through in fractured, uneasy shafts. Not far into the trail, I noticed strips of what looked like cloth snagged on a thorn bush. They fluttered gently in the breeze. I stepped closer and froze. It wasn't cloth. It was skin, thin, stretched dry like animal hide. Some of it still had coarse black hair. The edges were curled as if ripped or flayed. I turned back to the RV immediately. As I approached camp, I saw someone standing near my fire pit. It was a woman, mid-30s, dressed like a camper, flannel shirt, jeans, a pack slung over one shoulder. She looked lost, confused, but something about her posture was wrong. Too straight. Her arms hung stiffly at her sides. "Hey," I called out. She turned slowly like a puppet being manipulated by invisible strings. Her face was blank. Then it shifted into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I'm glad you're here," she said. Her voice didn't fit. It was like someone trying to speak through layers of cloth, muffled, filtered. "I didn't think anyone would come," she added. I stepped back. "Do you need help?" "I'm you," she said, and took a step forward. I bolted into the RV, slammed the door, and locked it. Through the tiny side window, I watched her walk, no glide, back into the woods. I didn't see her feet move. Later that afternoon, I tried to leave. I started the RV, engine humming steady and strong. Then the dashboard lights began to flicker. The GPS lit up and blinked erratically. The engine stalled, the whole vehicle shuddered, then went dead. I tried again. Nothing. Outside, the wind picked up. It carried a sound I'd heard before, soft whispers like someone talking just out of reach. I spent the next 2 hours checking the engine, the battery, the fuses. Everything looked fine. No reason it shouldn't start. Still, it was like the thing refused to let me leave. That evening, as dusk pressed down through the pines, I spotted someone moving through the trees again. A man this time. He looked familiar. Too familiar. It was my brother. Only my brother had died 3 years ago in a car accident. He walked to the edge of the campsite and stood there. "Don't you recognize me?" he asked. His voice was perfect. Exactly right. I'd know it anywhere, but I also knew it couldn't be him. He stepped closer. "You said you'd come find me." My legs refused to move. He took another step, then another. "I'm you," he said. That phrase again, always the same. I finally backed up and shouted, "You're not real." The thing that wore my brother's face smiled wide. Then its features started to twitch. Its eyes grew too large. Its mouth stretched too wide. Its skin rippled, and then it turned and disappeared into the trees. That night, I didn't sleep. I kept every light on in the RV. The fire burned low outside, casting long shadows that danced across the clearing. I could hear movement all around me, soft footsteps, scraping, voices calling my name in dozens of different tones. Once, I heard my mother's voice, then my father's, then mine. I wanted to scream, but I didn't want to give it anything to echo. At 3 a.m., something brushed against the door again. Not a knock, a caress. It whispered through the crack in the frame, "You're not who you think you are." Then silence, until the next whisper came, barely audible but filled with malice. "Come out." By dawn, I was shaking from exhaustion and fear. I opened the RV door to check the fire pit. Arranged in a perfect circle around it were bones, small ones, not animal, finger bones, 12 of them, each one pointing at the RV. Morning light did little to ease my dread. Everything looked the same trees, same silence, but I was different. I felt hollowed out, like something had taken root inside me during the night and left nothing behind but nerves and instinct. I gathered the finger bones in a canvas bag and buried them by the creek just beyond the gulch. I didn't know what else to do. Leaving them there, out in the open, felt like an invitation. My hands trembled the whole time. When I returned, the RV was just as I left it, except the driver's side door was wide open. I know I'd locked it. I always locked it. Inside, everything was untouched. No broken glass, no sign of forced entry. But something small and red sat on the counter where I kept my coffee pot. A pebble, smooth, almost polished. It glistened faintly in the light. I picked it up and felt heat radiating from it. Then I heard the whispers again, just for a second, and dropped it. It rolled under the stove. Whatever was out there had been inside. It had touched my things. It had left a gift. I packed everything I could in under 10 minutes. Food, tools, maps, spare keys. My laptop was dead, my sat phone was a paperweight, and the RV still wouldn't start. Even the emergency beacon failed to transmit. I'd never felt more alone. I decided to hike to the ranger station I'd seen marked on the trail map, roughly 6 miles southeast. With any luck, I'd find someone, or at least a working radio. As I locked the RV and slung my pack over my shoulders, I looked back one last time. There was a figure inside, standing just behind the blinds, watching. I ran. The trail narrowed quickly, winding between thick firs and jagged rocks. Branches scratched my arms. Every so often, I'd catch the sound of footsteps behind me, just for a moment, and then nothing. No animals, no wind, just the crunch of my boots and the distant echo of my own breath. Halfway to the station, I found something hanging from a branch. One of my shirts, folded neatly, hung like a flag. I didn't stop to retrieve it. I began to realize I wasn't just being watched. I was being herded. Every wrong turn I took brought me back to that same dead tree, its bark split open like a wound. Even when I tried to go off trail, the forest pushed back. Briars snagged my clothes. Unseen holes twisted my ankles. Eventually, the trees opened slightly, revealing a small clearing. At its center was a structure made of branches, bones, and tattered cloth, something between a teepee and a nest. Smoke drifted from a small pit beside it, and what looked like a deer's carcass lay nearby, stripped clean. And crouched beside the fire was a figure, thin, too thin, gray skin pulled tight over a frame that looked barely human. Its limbs were long, fingers like reeds. Its head turned as I stepped closer, revealing eyes that were not eyes at all, black like oil with no reflection. It stood slowly, almost lazily, and then it spoke, in my voice. "I'm you," it said, grinning with teeth too sharp, too many. I stumbled back. It took a step forward, 2. Then it dropped into a crouch and charged. I ran. It didn't move like a man. It was faster, lower to the ground, like a spider. I could hear it breathing, its long limbs slapping the earth as it closed in behind me. I felt its fingers graze my backpack once, then lose me as I leapt across a dry creek bed. I didn't stop until I found a fallen tree wide enough to crawl under. I wedged myself beneath it, breath coming in shallow gasps, and waited. For what felt like hours, I heard it circling. Not walking, clicking, like stones tapping against each other, like bones. Then, silence. Eventually, I crawled out and resumed walking. My watch was useless. I didn't know how much time had passed, maybe hours, maybe none at all. By dusk, I found the ranger station, or what was left of it. The roof had collapsed, the windows shattered, ivy curled in through the walls. Inside, papers were strewn across the floor, most too faded to read. But the radio tower, somehow, was still standing. I climbed up rung by rung until I reached the top. The view was both relief and horror. I could see the lake, far in the distance. I could also see the trail, my trail looping over itself like a snake biting its tail. I'd never moved forward, just in circles. I powered on the radio, static. Then a voice. Not mine, not a stranger's either. It sounded like everyone, 1,000 voices layered over one another. "Come home," it whispered. "We're waiting." Then the static cut out. That night, I slept inside the rec station. I barricaded the door with shelves and broken chairs, though I knew it wouldn't matter. Whatever was out there didn't need to break down doors. It could wear my face, my voice, my thoughts. As I drifted off to uneasy sleep, I realized something terrifying. The Skinwalker didn't just mimic you, it replaced you. I awoke to silence so complete it rang in my ears. The forest outside the broken windows was wrapped in early mist, pale blue and unmoving. I checked the barricade, untouched. No signs of entry, and yet I felt it before I even stood. Something was different. My boots were dry, despite the wet floor from the night's drizzle. My pack was zipped up tight, but I remembered leaving it half open. My pocket knife was gone from under my pillow, and in its place was the pebble, the smooth red one from the RV. I left it there. I didn't want to touch it again. I had to get out. The radio tower was dead now, completely. No static, no hum. I pulled apart the casing, hoping to jerry-rig a signal, but the wires inside had been cut, not chewed, sliced, deliberately, as if with a scalpel. That was the moment I knew I wasn't just dealing with a mimic. This thing was intelligent. It planned, and it wanted me to know it was always one step ahead. I left the ranger station behind, heading west through terrain I didn't recognize. My compass spun. Literally. I tapped it, shook it. The needle circled like it was caught in a whirlpool. Even the moss on the trees pointed in different directions, contradicting each other. Around noon, I came upon a series of rusted poles rising from the earth like gravestones, old logging markers. That meant there had once been roads here, man-made tracks. It gave me hope. I followed the line downhill, deeper into a basin where fog clung low to the ground. Then I saw it, half devoured by vines and moss. In the center, a concrete structure. Low, windowless, more like a bunker than a building. The door was ajar. Steel, rusted but thick. Something about it felt familiar. I stepped inside. The air was dry, too dry and stale, like nothing had breathed there in years. My footsteps echoed off walls lined with peeling paint and shelves of rotted supplies. Emergency rations, old maps, some labeled in codes I didn't understand. At the back of the bunker was a stairwell. Down. I shouldn't have gone. Every instinct screamed at me to leave, but part of me knew I'd find something important down there. Answers, maybe, or at least the pieces of a puzzle that had kept me locked in this living nightmare. The stairs creaked beneath me, then opened into a lower room dimly lit by a cracked lantern hanging from the ceiling, and pinned to the far wall in rows of rusted filing cabinets were photographs, black and white, color, Polaroids, dozens of them, all of people, campers, hikers, loggers, rangers, faces frozen in mid-laugh or half-smile. Underneath each photo was a name and a word. Some said replaced, others failed, and some were marked pending. I searched the wall until I found the one with my face. It wasn't a photo, it was a drawing. Rushed, almost scribbled, as if made in desperation, but unmistakably me. Underneath it, scrawled in black ink, assimilating. I backed away, nearly tripping over a file box. Inside were pages and pages of notes, handwritten, typed, recorded. One stood out, a torn journal, water-stained but legible. June 3rd, the Skinwalker doesn't just kill, it becomes. It's learned our voices, our habits, our faces. But the thing that terrifies me the most, it doesn't imitate us to hunt us. It imitates us to learn how to survive among us. It walks back into town. It goes home. I dropped the journal. I understood now. It wasn't interested in scaring me. It didn't care about haunting my nights or tormenting me with false visions. It was studying me, preparing. The whispers, the mimicry, the dreamlike logic of the forest, it was all part of a slow takeover. And if it succeeded, if it learned enough, it would wear my life like a costume. And no one would know. Suddenly, the lantern flickered. The temperature dropped. Then I heard the sound of footsteps descending the stairs. Heavy, deliberate. I ducked behind a broken shelf just as the steel door creaked open again. A figure entered. Same height, same build. Dressed in the clothes I'd worn 2 days ago. It paused in front of my picture on the wall. Then it sighed, and in my exact voice muttered, "Almost done." I clamped my hand over my mouth. The other me turned toward the filing cabinets, slowly running its fingers across the photos, as if reminiscing. Then, without looking, it said, "You're not as quiet as you think." I bolted. Out the hall, up the stairs, through the door, back into the fog. Branches slapped my face, tore at my arms. I didn't care, I just ran. Behind me, no footsteps, no shouts, just silence. I made it back to the RV by some instinctive, half-mad miracle. And it was gone. The clearing was empty. No tracks, no tire ruts, no soot from the fire pit, just an open patch of grass as if I had never been there at all. And then I heard it again, behind me, my voice, calm, measured, rehearsed. "You left the door open." I didn't look back. I couldn't. Some primitive instinct told me that if I acknowledged it, it would become real, fully, undeniably real. But even without turning, I could feel it watching me, standing too still, too close, breathing in rhythm with mine. I backed away slowly, listening as my own voice called out again, this time softer, friendlier. Hey, it's okay, you're safe now. It was my voice, yes, but it had none of my hesitation, none of my fear. It was like hearing a mask speak. I turned and ran. Not toward anything in particular, there was nothing left to run to. But running gave me the illusion of control. Trees blurred past, ground shifting from dirt to moss to loose stone. My legs ached, my lungs burned. Still, I kept going. Eventually, I reached the edge of a bluff that dropped sharply into black pine forest below. A dead end. I spun around, expecting to see it standing there, arms open like a friend. But I was alone, almost. Something stirred behind the tree line, just out of sight. Not the mimic, this was bigger, slower. I heard the weight of its movements. Branches snapped, not broken underfoot, but bent aside, like something was moving through them with careful force. Then I saw them. Eyes, more than one pair, luminous and colorless like fish scales catching light underwater. They blinked, not in synchrony, but in staggered rhythm, as if each belonged to something separate. I wasn't dealing with Skinwalker. There were more, and something had changed in them. They weren't hiding anymore. They were watching me openly, calmly, like an animal studying a trap it no longer feared. That was when the realization struck me like ice water. This wasn't about me, not just me. I was one of many. I scrambled along the edge of the bluff, hoping to find a slope, a path, anything that would get me down. The forest below offered no safety, but I knew the bluff behind me offered none either. And then through the fog, I saw it. A ranger tower. Not new, weathered, lopsided, and leaning like a drunk, but real. Real enough to stand and hopefully high enough to give me a signal. I half stumbled, half sprinted toward it, ignoring the sharp edges of exposed roots and the deep cuts they left on my legs. I reached the bottom of the stairs and climbed, fast but not reckless. Halfway up, I heard footsteps beneath me. 2 sets, then 3. Then silence. I reached the top and slammed the hatch shut behind me, wedging a metal pole through the handles. The room was dust-choked but intact. An old radio rested on a cracked desk. I nearly wept. I flipped it on. Nothing. Then I banged the side and twisted the tuning dial like a desperate gambler. A faint signal buzzed to life. Station 9, this is District Dispatch. Repeat, Station 9, do you copy? I grabbed the mic. My name is Eric Downs. I'm at Station 9, Higgins Lake Perimeter. Please, I need help. There's something in the woods, something not human. Silence, then static, then a man's voice, flat, measured, too calm. Eric, we already extracted you. I froze. No, you didn't. I'm still here. Static again. Eric, protocol was completed, containment achieved, subject neutralized, you're safe. It wasn't just flat, it was me. The exact tone I used when I tried to calm myself down. I dropped the mic. Something thudded on the stairs below. Then again, getting closer. I scanned the room. No weapons, no real escape. The windows were too narrow, the hatch sealed below. The trap had already closed. I grabbed the flare gun from the emergency kit and aimed it at the door. Another thud. Then the handle began to move, slowly, like someone trying not to wake a sleeping animal. The pole bent, not broke, bent, like it was being reshaped by something with slow, unrelenting strength. And then the voice came, from directly behind me. You made it home. I spun, flare gun raised, but the room was empty. And in that silence, the forest erupted. Howls, cracks, screams that sounded like laughter, layered and echoing. The hatch burst open. I fired. The flare lit the room in a moment of red brilliance. And in that flash, I saw what stood in the hatch. It had my face, but the eyes were wrong. Too wide, too round, too eager. The flare struck it in the chest. It screamed, not in pain, but in outrage, like something that had been interrupted mid-feast. I kicked at it, grabbed the metal chair and slammed it down the stairs, blocking the way. It retreated. I heard the others outside, not walking, waiting. I lit the second flare and held it close. That night I sat alone in the tower, red light flickering against the walls, watching as the creatures circled below. They weren't trying to breach anymore. They were patient. Because they knew the fire wouldn't last, and neither would I. Morning never truly arrived. Light seeped into the forest like something reluctant, forced. The fog had thickened again, blanketing everything in pale gray silence. I sat huddled in the corner of the tower, the last flare long since burned out, its husk cold beside me. But they never came back. I don't know why. Maybe they had learned everything they needed. Maybe they were waiting for the next step. Or maybe they didn't need me anymore. I crept to the hatch. Slowly, carefully, I looked down the stairs. Empty, no movement, no sound. I waited another hour just to be sure. Then, with no other choice, I descended. My legs trembled with every step, not from fear now, but from exhaustion. The kind that seeps into your bones and makes you question if you'll ever feel normal again. The clearing below was quiet. The footprints were gone. No scorch marks from the flares. Even the broken chair I'd thrown down had vanished, like the forest had swallowed the night whole. I walked. I don't know for how long. Time had collapsed into a loop of fog and trees and silence. No direction made sense anymore. I just kept moving. And then, like something had blinked, I stepped out of the woods and onto pavement. A ranger road. An old Jeep sat idling near a gate with the U.S. Forest Service logo. A man in uniform stood beside it, looking at a map. He startled when he saw me. "Jesus, are you Eric Downs?" I opened my mouth, stopped, nodded. He stared at me. I could tell he didn't quite believe it. I didn't blame him. My face was covered in cuts, clothes torn, eyes empty probably. He radioed for medical evac. They loaded me into a truck, drove me to a nearby hospital, said I was lucky to be alive. I nodded again, smiled, thanked them. But inside, something was missing. Because here's the truth. I don't remember making it out of the tower. I don't remember leaving the forest. One moment I was clutching the cold flare casing, and the next, I was standing in the ranger's clearing. They said I had been missing for 3 days. That wasn't possible. I had only been in the tower for 1 night, maybe 2. Unless that place, that thing, had played with time the same way it played with voices. I asked about the RV. They found no sign of it. I asked about the radio recordings from Station 9. They told me Station 9 had been decommissioned a decade ago, burned down during a controlled fire. No tower, no records. I asked if anyone else had gone missing recently. They hesitated, then gave me a list, 7 names, all campers, all disappeared within a 5-mile radius of Higgins Lake over the past 5 years. None found, none returned, all listed as presumed lost. A month later, I tried going back. Not far, just to the lake's edge, but something stopped me. Not fear exactly, something else. I didn't feel the pull anymore. The Skinwalker, or whatever it was, had moved on. Or perhaps it had already done what it needed to do. People still go camping out there, still park their RVs near the tree line, still bring their kids, their dogs, their beers. They don't know. They can't know. Every now and then I check the forums, read stories, little things, footprints in places they shouldn't be. Strange laughter heard after midnight, a second voice echoing their own. And sometimes a camper will post something like this. Came back from Higgins Lake today. Weird thing, our group photo has one extra face. No one remembers him, but he's standing right in the back, smiling, like he belongs. I used to want answers. Now I just want distance. Because I know the truth. That thing in the woods, it wasn't trying to kill me. It was trying to replace me. Maybe it still is. Maybe it already has. And I'm just the one who hasn't figured it out yet. Word count, 1,400 words. Even now, I don't fully trust what I see in the mirror. Every twitch, every glance that lasts a little too long. Sometimes I wonder if it's really me behind those eyes. You'd think a brush with something so unnatural would leave you terrified forever. But the real horror isn't in what chased me through the forest. It's in the slow unraveling that came after. The way familiar faces start to feel just slightly off. The way you walk into a room and forget what you came for. The strange sense that someone has been wearing your skin behind your back, learning how to walk like you, talk like you, be you. Higgins Lake remains beautiful, pristine, and remote, the perfect place to disappear or to change into something else. So if you're thinking about RV camping out there, go ahead, set up your little fire, roast your marshmallows, listen to the quiet. But if you hear something behind you that sounds like your own voice, don't turn around, don't respond. Because once it knows you've heard it, the game begins. And if you come back from that trip and something feels wrong, if your reflection smiles before you do, or your voice echoes strangely in your throat, ask yourself this: did you make it back, or did something else come back in your place?
I'd been traveling solo across the Southwest for months, chasing that sense of peace only the wild could offer. Arizona was next on my list. The towering pines of the high desert called to me more than the red rocks or tourist traps. I'd read about a secluded RV campsite just outside the Navajo Nation, tucked away in a stretch of forest the locals called Canyon Pines. No hookups, no cell service, just me, the trees, and the wind. It was late October when I arrived, and the air carried that heavy stillness unique to the shoulder season. Too cold for most campers, too early for snow. The dirt road that led to the site was barely maintained, lined with skeletal trees that had begun shedding their bark. My GPS had already died 10 miles back, and the last road sign I saw was warped beyond legibility. When I pulled into the clearing where I planned to set up, the first thing I noticed was how quiet it was. No birds, no rustling leaves, just an oppressive silence that seemed to soak into the RV's frame. I parked beneath a cluster of ancient pines and stepped out, boots crunching dry needles. To the east, the ground sloped gently toward a gulch filled with low shrubs and jagged boulders. Beyond that, nothing but forest. That evening, just as the sun was bleeding into the mountains, I decided to hike a short loop trail that ran along the canyon rim. About halfway through, I saw something strange. A tall pine with long, deep gouges carved down its bark, almost like claws. At its base were symbols etched into the dirt, spirals and triangles, and the remains of what looked like a small animal skull surrounded by ash. I backed away quickly. Some kind of offering, I thought. Maybe from a local ceremony or a prank by hikers. Still, I marked the location on my map and returned to camp uneasy. When I got back, a pickup truck had pulled into the site across the clearing. A man stood outside it, lean and weathered, wearing a faded ranger's uniform. I called out to greet him, but he didn't wave, just watched me, motionless, as if sizing me up. "Evening," I offered. He finally nodded. "You alone?" "Yeah, just passing through. Thought this place might be quiet." "It is," he said flatly. "Too quiet, some would say." I laughed awkwardly. "You patrol this area often?" "I don't patrol here," he replied. "No one does. Not anymore." Something about his tone made my stomach twist. "You planning to stay long?" "Just a night or two." He looked at the setting sun. "Leave before dark. Don't let it get too quiet. You understand?" I opened my mouth to respond, but he was already turning back toward his truck. As the engine roared and he drove away, dust curling up behind his tires, I realized I hadn't seen a badge on his shirt. No radio, no sidearm. I didn't see him again. That night, I made a fire and cooked a simple meal. As I sat with my back to the RV, I listened for the chirp of crickets or the cry of an owl, anything, but it was as if the world had pressed mute. The fire flickered lower and I tossed on another log. That's when I heard it. A low, rasping whisper, so faint I thought it might have been wind, coming from the direction of the gulch. It didn't form words at first, just a breath-like sound. Then it grew clearer. My name, twice, whispered low and slow. I stood up fast, nearly knocking over my chair. Flashlight in hand, I scanned the trees, the slope of the canyon, the edge of my firelight. Nothing. No movement. "Hello?" I called. "Is someone out there?" Silence. I backed into the RV, locked the door, and drew the blinds. Inside, the heater ticked and clicked as it warmed the air, but every other sound was muffled by that unnatural hush outside. I climbed into bed but left my boots on. Could have been a hiker, or maybe the ranger messing with me, or maybe not. Later that night, I awoke to a soft thump. Something had brushed against the side of the RV. I held my breath. Another thump. Then, the unmistakable sound of footsteps circling slowly around the vehicle. I peeked through a sliver in the blind, but saw nothing. Then a low voice, gravelly and too deep, spoke directly outside the door. "Let me in. I'm hurt." I didn't move. The voice again. "Please. It's cold." Whoever it was, they hadn't knocked. I stayed silent, still, waiting. Then the voice shifted. "I'm you." The footsteps faded. The silence returned. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. By morning, I found a long, pale handprint smeared across the passenger side window. I hadn't touched that side in days.
We searched the entire day. From the moment the first light hit the canyon walls, we were on our feet, combing the dry washes and spiny thickets, calling Jordan's name until our voices cracked. Caleb took the lead. following the path of least resistance between walls of sandstone. Maya trailed behind him, snapping the occasional photo, more out of habit than purpose. I kept stopping, turning in circles, certain I was hearing faint footsteps behind us. But no one was ever there. We checked higher ground, narrow shelves, small caves, even climbed up a ridge we had passed the day before. Still nothing. Not a track, not a sound. At one point, I found a clump of dark hair snagged on a broken shrub. I called the others over, and Caleb gently plucked it loose. "Could be Jordan's, could be coyote," he muttered. "But we haven't seen a single animal since we got here," I said. He didn't respond. Maya stood staring down into a bend in the canyon where the rock dipped inward like a gaping throat. He wouldn't just leave. Not like that. Something's wrong. It was late afternoon when we returned to camp. The light had shifted by then, softer, heavier, as if the canyon were tilting into shadow. The silence that had hovered since the beginning now felt oppressive. Our movements seemed to echo louder. The cliffs loomed, taller than ever. Maya sat with her knees pulled to her chest, staring at the last photo she had taken of Jordan on her camera screen. "He looks happy here," she said, "but there's something off. Look at his eyes." I leaned in. The picture had been taken at twilight, just after we finished dinner the night before he vanished. Jordan was grinning, holding a marshmallow on a stick. But his eyes, they weren't looking at the camera. They were looking past it. And they were wide, like he'd seen something behind Maya at the moment she clicked the shutter. That night, none of us lit a fire. We stayed in our tents pretending sleep would help us figure out what to do next. But I couldn't sleep. Around midnight, I heard something. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate. I unzipped the flap just enough to peer outside. A figure stood in the dark. Jordan, he was just standing there, half lit by moonlight about 10 feet from our tents, head tilted slightly, hands at his sides. I crawled out slowly, whispering, "Jordan?" He didn't move at first. Then he smiled. "Hey, man." His voice was casual, too casual, the exact cadence of his usual tone. I rushed over and threw my arms around him. "Where the hell were you?" He patted my back. Got turned around. I climbed too far up and couldn't find my way down until it was dark. Slept under a ledge. Maya and Caleb came out of their tents, blinking in disbelief. "You're okay?" Maya asked. Jordan nodded, bit dehydrated. "But yeah, I'm okay." He sat down, drank some water, and told us a story about following an animal trail up a narrow ledge, trying to take photos and slipping. His leg had a fresh scratch, but it wasn't deep. As he talked, I watched him, studied him. He sounded right, looked right, acted right. But something was off. His smile didn't reach his eyes, and when Maya asked him what he'd eaten to survive the night, he paused, just for a beat. Then he said, "Jerky in my bag." But we had his bag. It had been in his tent. We'd all seen it. Maya and I exchanged a glance, but neither of us said anything. We didn't want to scare him, or maybe we didn't want to scare ourselves. That night, sleep came reluctantly, and I woke up to a sound I'll never forget. My own voice calling from outside the tent, soft, uncertain, like I was trying not to wake anyone else. "Hey, it's me. Can you come out a second?" I sat up in a panic. Across from me, Maya was awake too, eyes wide. She mouthed, "You heard that?" I nodded. The voice came again, closer. "I need help. I dropped something." It was me, but I was in the tent. Maya clutched my arm. She was trembling. Then, from the other tent, Caleb called out, "Jordan, that you?" No answer. I unzipped the flap slowly. The night was black, no moon, just shadows. I stepped outside. Caleb was standing near the edge of camp, holding a flashlight, which he hadn't turned on yet. "I heard him," he said. He walked out this way. Maya came out behind me. "We should stay together." We called Jordan's name. From the dark came a voice. "Guys?" It was Jordan. He stepped out from behind a boulder. "How'd you get over there?" I asked. I was following something. A deer. Or maybe it wasn't. He looked confused. "You were just in your tent," I said. He frowned. "No, I wasn't." Something in his tone. It was different now. Not just flat, hollow. Caleb stepped back. "Where's your flashlight?" Jordan looked at his hands. "I guess I dropped it." Maya stepped forward and whispered, "Say something, anything." Jordan looked at her blankly. "Something." We all stood there in silence. Then Maya asked quietly, "What was the last thing I said to you before you disappeared?" Jordan blinked. "You said, 'Bring back snacks.'" That wasn't right. The last thing she'd said was, "Don't go too far. We're losing light." She didn't correct him. We all turned in for the night, but no one slept. In the morning, Caleb took me aside. His face was pale. "That's not Jordan," he said flatly. "I don't know what that is, but it's not him." "You sure?" He nodded slowly. His voice cracks when he's nervous. Always has. Last night when we confronted him, he didn't crack, and he walked like a stranger. "I've been watching him too," I admitted. "He doesn't blink often, and he never casts a shadow," Caleb said. I stared at him. "What?" "I watched at dawn," he said. "Just before sunrise, when we were all casting shadows across the sand, he had none." My stomach turned. We returned to camp. Jordan was sitting cross-legged, watching the canyon wall like it was playing a movie. Maya was beside him, speaking quietly. Later that day, we continued deeper into the canyon. Jordan led the way. Caleb walked behind him, fingers twitching near his pocket knife. I followed, eyes fixed on the prints in the dirt. 3 sets of boot prints, but 4 of us were walking. Canyon narrowed again. We walked in single file, the orange cliffs pressing close on both like massive jaws. Our shadows stretched beside us, long and clear in the sharp afternoon sun, except for Jordan, or whoever or whatever was walking in his skin. I forced myself to keep watching his feet. Every step left a print, but no shadow. My mind tried to explain it. Maybe an illusion, maybe an angle of light, but even the logic in my head was trembling, clinging to whatever made sense. Jordan didn't seem to notice. He kept up his usual banter, except now it came out like a parody of himself. Phrases too exact, laughter timed too perfectly. He repeated old jokes from the trip verbatim, word for word, same inflection. Caleb slowed and let me catch up beside him. "We can't keep pretending," he whispered. "It's not right. That thing is studying us, picking up cues. We need a plan," I muttered back. "Tonight, while it sleeps." If it sleeps. We stopped at a split in the canyon around late afternoon. One trail dipped into a dry riverbed lined with brittle scrub. The other climbed upward toward a ridgeline shaded by overhangs. Caleb studied the map. Maya looked pale. "Which way do we go?" I asked. Jordan pointed to the higher trail. "That leads to White Alcove. Good shelter, great views. I saw it on the hike in." Caleb looked up from the map. "You said you got lost. How do you know what's ahead?" Jordan blinked slowly. For a long second, no one said a word. Then he smiled. "Guess I remember more than I thought." We didn't argue. We took the lower trail. The sun dipped fast behind the cliffs. Cold air crept down into the canyon with it. That night, we didn't light a fire. We sat in a triangle, close, backs to the cliff wall, trying to act natural. Jordan hummed to himself. Maya wrapped herself in her blanket and stared into the dark. After a while, I slipped away under the pretense of using the bathroom. Caleb followed 5 minutes later. We met behind a tangle of rocks out of earshot. "We can't stay another night with it," Caleb said. "It's learning us too fast." I nodded. "But if we confront it and we're wrong, we're not wrong." He pulled something from his pocket. A small mirror, no bigger than his palm. Old stories say they don't have reflections, no shadows, no real shape, just borrowed form. You ever see it eat, drink? No, me neither. We returned to camp. Jordan was already looking at us when we arrived, like he'd been listening, waiting. Caleb smiled, too brightly. "Let's take a look at those photos, Maya." She blinked, then nodded slowly and handed him her camera. He scrolled through the pictures. Most were landscape shots, but buried between them, photos of the camp, of us, of Jordan. He held up the camera. "Remember this?" It was a photo of Jordan sitting near the fire the night before he disappeared. We all leaned in. The firelight threw long shadows across our faces, but not his. He had no shadow. The air seemed to thicken. Maya stepped back. I saw the realization spread across her face like ink in water. Jordan tilted his head slightly. "That's a weird photo." His voice stayed calm. "Maybe a trick of the light," he said, standing. His limbs moved too smoothly like a marionette. His shoulders seemed to stretch just a little too far when he rose, like he was still learning where joints were supposed to stop. He smiled at Maya. "You okay?" She didn't answer. She couldn't. That's when Caleb took the mirror from his pocket and held it up. "Look at this," he said. "Do you see yourself?" Jordan stepped closer, looked down into the glass, and for a brief moment we all saw it. His reflection was wrong. Not just absent, distorted. A faint outline of a person, but blurry. As if he couldn't settle on one face. Caleb dropped the mirror. That's when it changed. He lunged, not at Caleb, at Maya. She screamed and fell back as the thing's hands grabbed her shoulders. I rushed in, throwing my weight into him, knocking him to the ground. He hit the dirt harder than I expected, but sprang up faster than anything human. Caleb pulled the flare from his pack and struck it. The red blaze hissed to life. In the red glow, the thing showed its real face, or rather, its lack of one. Its skin melted in and out of Jordan's shape. His smile rippled and his eyes flickered between brown, blue, then pitch black. Its limbs lengthened, shrank, then twisted back to its familiar form, like it didn't want to let go of the mask. I heard it hiss something, not a word, just a sound, like boiling water being sucked through bone. We ran, straight up the canyon wall, toward the ridge it said not to take. The thing gave chase. It didn't shout or growl. It just came, feet pounding the dirt, body glitching between frames like a broken film reel. Caleb shouted, "Split up." I didn't hesitate. Maya and I veered left. Caleb darted right into the scrub. We ran until our lungs were on fire. The path rose in a brutal incline. My calves screamed. Maya stumbled, but I caught her arm. Behind us, I could still hear the thing moving, no longer speaking, just breathing. Shallow, rapid, unrelenting. We reached the ridge. It was a dead end. A sheer drop over the canyon wall. Maya looked back. "It's coming." There was nowhere to go. Then we heard a noise far off. A howl, not a coyote. Something deeper. The thing stopped just before the edge, 20 feet away. Its body shimmered, uncertain. It stepped closer, still wearing Jordan's face. Then it spoke, not with his voice, with mine. I wouldn't leave her behind. Maya froze. It took another step. Its voice changed again, into hers. "Help me," it said, mimicking her exact tone from 2 nights ago. I felt the edge behind me. One wrong step and we'd fall. I turned to Maya. She was crying, shaking. "Listen to me," I said. "That's not him. It's not me. We have to jump or fight." She nodded slowly. Then the thing lunged again. I grabbed Maya's hand and we jumped, down into the dark. We hit hard. The air punched out of my lungs as I landed in a slope of loose gravel, tumbling down a narrow incline that scraped my arms and tore at my legs. I heard Maya cry out somewhere behind me. Then the world flipped sideways and I slammed into a dry riverbed. Everything went quiet. The silence didn't last. Above us, back on the ridge, I heard it pacing along the edge, the sound of stone crumbling beneath its feet. But it didn't follow. Not right away. I rolled over, groaning. "Maya?" She answered with a cough. "I'm okay." I crawled toward her. She was crumpled beside a boulder, hair tangled, blood on her lip. "We need cover," I said. The canyon floor here was different, more narrow and partially overgrown. Gnarled trees clung to the walls, their roots like skeletal fingers gripping the stone. We staggered together toward a crevice in the canyon wall, barely visible from where we fell. Inside was a space barely large enough to crouch in. An old hollow, maybe from a collapsed shelf, partly protected by slabs of loose rock. It smelled of minerals and stale air. We sat in the dark, catching our breath. "It's still up there," Maya whispered. "I know." I peeked out, saw nothing. Just the sheer cliff we jumped from, now shrouded in moonlight. "I don't think it can come down that way," I said. "Then it'll find another way." We stayed hidden until the wind changed. When we finally moved, it was dawn again. My body ached with every step, but we pressed deeper into the canyon. No map, no trail, just a desperate attempt to stay away from whatever was hunting us. Maya was quiet. I knew she was thinking what I was. Caleb might be gone. We didn't talk about him. Midday, we stumbled into a clearing. Or maybe clearing wasn't the right word. It was more like a scar in the canyon, a long, flat space of carved stone surrounded by high walls. In the center was a structure barely standing, weathered, splintered wood, partly collapsed. An old cabin. I hesitated. Maya looked at me. Shelter or a trap? We went anyway. The door was off its hinges. Inside was dark and dry. There were shelves, old storage boxes, a cot with a torn blanket, and in the corner, a bundle of notebooks sealed in plastic. I knelt and pulled one free. The first page was dated 1973. It belonged to someone named El Redtree, a ranger, I guessed, stationed here decades ago. I flipped through the pages. Most were uneventful. Daily logs, weather reports. But then things changed. June 14, 1974. Heard noises again from the South Cliff. Voices. Sounded like my brother, but he died in 1967. Not sure if I'm imagining it. June 21st, 1974. Saw a figure near the petroglyphs. Tall, wrong posture. Wasn't walking right. July 1st, 1974. Think I saw myself. I handed the book to Maya. She flipped through quickly, then stopped. Another entry. July 12th, 1974. Locals say this canyon has things older than time. A skinwalker, maybe. Something worse. One said, it doesn't kill to feed, it kills to learn. Mimics, becomes, until it forgets who it was, if it ever was anything at all. I looked around the cabin, found a map on the wall, hand-drawn, fragile. A red X had been marked near a spiral shape labeled Echo Pit. I remembered something the ranger had written in another entry. It mimics sound, speech, movement, but it can't make its own shadow. It doesn't reflect. And if it learns your face, it tries to keep it, even when you're gone. We sat there in silence. Finally, Maya said, I think it's trying to replace one of us. I nodded. Maybe it already did. She looked at me then, long, hard, her lips parted, then closing again. You think I'm? She began. I held up a hand. No, I don't know who to trust anymore. She exhaled shakily. Neither do I. We stayed in that cabin until evening. When the light began to fade, I turned to the map again. The Echo Pit wasn't far, just a few miles west. We go there, I said. Why? Maya asked. Because if this is where it started, maybe we find a way to end it. We left just before sundown. The path to Echo Pit wasn't a trail anymore. It was barely visible. We followed deer tracks through brush and over fallen rock. A few times we stopped and listened. The canyon had gone back to being quiet again. Too quiet. Then, just before the last bend in the rock, Maya grabbed my arm. Did you hear that? I listened. Nothing. Then I heard it. My voice, whispering my own name, soft, drawn out, from somewhere behind us. We didn't look back. When we finally reached Echo Pit, we found it was exactly that. A pit. A massive sinkhole, 30 feet across, cutting deep into the rock like the canyon had cracked open. It was surrounded by markings, petroglyphs, spirals, stick figures with no faces, others with many arms, and paint, faded but visible, red smears across the stone like bleeding hands. What is this place? Maya whispered. I didn't know, but I stepped to the edge and looked down and froze. The walls inside the pit weren't just dirt, they were smooth like the inside of a well. And carved into them in a spiral that twisted downward were thousands of claw marks, handprints, finger streaks. It went down farther than I could see. And then, deep inside, something moved, a ripple, like liquid. But it wasn't water. It was a shape, a person maybe, or something pretending to be. It looked up, and I knew it saw me. We backed away slowly, carefully. That's when we heard footsteps behind us. We turned. Caleb was standing there, but he didn't look at us, just past us. Where have you been? Maya said. He didn't answer. I stepped toward him. Caleb, he blinked, then smiled. That's when I noticed the dust. His clothes had no dirt, his face no cuts, no bruises, like he hadn't fallen, hadn't run. I felt the hairs rise on my arms. Maya whispered, it's not him. Then it spoke, not Caleb's voice. It was mine again, but louder now, confident. I know the way out. I didn't speak. Neither did Maya. We stood frozen at the edge of the Echo Pit, the ancient hole yawning behind us, and Caleb standing just 10 feet ahead, wearing a perfect copy of our friend's skin. His expression held the same kind of calm assurance Caleb always wore when reading a map or solving a problem. But now it felt like a lie pulled too tight across a face that didn't belong. I know the way out, it repeated. My voice again, this time with an inflection I recognized. My exact cadence when I'd said those words to Maya earlier at the cabin. It had listened. It had learned. Maya gripped my arm. We run, she whispered, but we couldn't, not with the pit behind us. And then it tilted its head, not unnaturally, not grotesque, just wrong, like someone trying to remember how to gesture like a human being. You two are tired, it said, switching back to Caleb's voice. You've come so far. You don't need to run anymore. There's no one left to pretend for. Its eyes glinted in the low light. I took a small step forward. If you know the way out, I said, then lead us. It smiled and turned around. We followed. We had no choice. It led us slowly along the canyon wall, feet moving with the practiced rhythm of someone who had watched us long enough to mimic every movement. Every so often, it would pause and glance back to make sure we were still following. I began to realize something as we moved. It wasn't guiding us out. It was circling us back, toward the Echo Pit. I saw it in the land formations, a dead cottonwood we'd passed already, a scarred boulder shaped like a wolf's head. We were walking in a loop. I tugged Maya's sleeve gently, whispered, "We're going back to the pit." She gave a tiny nod, jaw clenched. We had to act. As we reached a narrow pass between two cliff shoulders, I stopped. "Wait." It stopped too. I walked up to Caleb. "Show me your shadow." It blinked. "What?" "Right now. Step into the light." The late afternoon sun cut across the trail in golden lines. I pointed to the brightest patch. "Step there. Let us see you." It hesitated for only a moment, then stepped forward. Its foot pressed into the dust, but the ground beneath it remained blank. No distortion, no line, no cast, no shadow. Maya gasped. I reached into my jacket and pulled out the small fragment of mirror I'd salvaged from the cabin, held it up. Its reflection was worse than last time. Flickering faces. Not just Caleb, Jordan, me, Maya, even faces I didn't recognize, twisting in and out of one another like a slideshow of stolen identities. 1 second its eyes were brown, then black, then pale blue, like static shifting behind skin. I raised the mirror higher. That's when it hissed. A dry, windless sound that sent a pulse of nausea through me. Its form shimmered, just slightly, like it was barely keeping the illusion together. And then it lunged. But not at me, at Maya. She screamed and fell back. I hurled the mirror into its face. The glass shattered against its forehead, and for a moment the thing dropped its mask. What stood before us was not human. Its skin rippled like water in a broken bowl, translucent and webbed with dark veins, limbs too long, mouth too wide, no nose, no eyes, just pits. It stank of wet stone and scorched wood. I grabbed Maya's hand and bolted. We didn't speak, just ran, back toward the echo pit. I didn't know why. Maybe some part of me believed what the ranger had written in that journal. If it came from there, maybe it can end there too. Behind us, the thing was following, feet pounding the rock with inhuman precision, gaining. It had dropped the pretense now. No more mimicry, just the raw speed of something made for pursuit. As we reached the pit, I yanked Maya behind a low stone and hissed, "The flare? Do you have it?" She dug into her jacket, pulled it free. One left. We lit it. The red flame bloomed with a violent hiss, and the thing stopped, just at the edge of the pit. Its body rippled again, twisting back into a near-perfect version of Caleb, panting, arms up. "It's me," it begged. "Don't do this, please." The voice broke, cracking exactly where Caleb's always did when he was afraid. Maya's eyes filled with tears. I gritted my teeth. "You're not him." It stepped closer. I stepped back, holding the flare between us. "You took them," I said. "Jordan, Caleb, maybe others before us." Its smile collapsed. "I am all of them." Then it lunged. I threw the flare. It struck its chest, and the creature shrieked, stumbling back. Its skin ignited, not like fire, but like phosphorescence, glowing in every joint, caught every wrinkle, revealing layers of faces trying to press outward from beneath the surface. It staggered and slipped. 1 foot crumbled the edge, and it fell, down into the echo pit. The scream that rose wasn't a sound. It was hundreds of sounds, overlapping, human, animal, my voice, Maya's, Caleb's, all echoing up the stone walls as it plummeted into darkness. Then silence. We stared down for a long time, but saw nothing, just black. I turned to Maya. She was still crying, shaking, but breathing. We sat there until night came, and then we climbed. We moved slow, careful. Every rock felt like it could give way, but we didn't stop. At the canyon rim, hours later, the air felt thinner, clearer. The stars above no longer looked like watching eyes. We made it out by dawn. We didn't speak much after we left the canyon. Our steps were heavy, broken, sometimes veering off course, even though the path was clearer now, wider, less hostile. But our minds were stretched too thin. It felt like we were walking not just out of the canyon, but out of a place that wasn't supposed to exist. Maya limped, and I had a splitting headache that pulsed in rhythm with my heartbeat. We found the edge of the trail by noon, then the ridge, then the sign that had greeted us 2 days before. Sun faded, barely legible, but more real than anything we'd seen since. We stood there a long time. "Do you think it's dead?" Maya finally asked. I didn't answer because I didn't know. The canyon hadn't made sense, not in a way that maps or science could explain. If that thing had fallen into a physical pit, maybe it was gone. But what if the pit was something else? A door, a vein, an echo chamber. We didn't have the words. We returned to the ranger station 3 hours later. It was locked and silent. No staff, no vehicles. Just dusty flyers and a board marked with out-of-date warnings about flooding and bobcat sightings. No missing person reports. No search teams. No one even knew we were there. We used the emergency radio and waited. A forestry truck came just before nightfall. The man who drove us down was quiet. Older, with long white sideburns and a face that didn't blink enough. When I told him we'd been lost near the South Canyon, he grunted. "Shouldn't be out there this time of year," he muttered. "Ground's wrong." "Wrong how?" Maya asked. He gave us a sidelong glance. "Canyon's not stable," he said. "Grows in places, shrinks in others, doesn't match the maps anymore. Locals don't go near it." "What about the Echo Pit?" I asked. That made him pause. "You saw that?" he said quietly. I nodded. He didn't speak for a long time after that. His eye just gripped the wheel and watched the road. As we neared the valley floor, he spoke again. Low, almost like he was speaking to himself. "They say it's where the land listens, so well it can talk back." Neither of us responded. We were dropped at a hospital in a small town I'd never heard of. They checked us for dehydration, concussion, exposure. We gave fake names, said we got separated from a hiking group. No one questioned us too hard. We never told the full truth. How could we? Who would believe that a creature made of voices and skin had stalked us through an ever-shifting canyon and tried to become us? Caleb was never found. The official report lists him as missing. His family posted flyers. A few hiking forums circulated theories. Bears, cartels, accidents. No one looked too hard. That part of the map is a blind spot, a forgotten crease in the earth. Maya stopped replying to my messages a few weeks later. I understood. Some things are too heavy to carry with someone else. But even now, back home, back in the soft safety of concrete and power lines, I still hear it. My voice. Late at night, in the next room, mimicking a cough I once made, a laugh I don't remember giving, whispering my own name back to me through the walls. I keep mirrors covered now. And the other day in a crowded grocery store, I turned a corner and froze because someone walked past me, and they had my exact posture, exact shoes, same scar above the knuckle, but they didn't look back. They didn't need to. They already knew how I looked. They already knew everything. I haven't slept since, because I keep thinking about something I read in that old ranger's journal. A skinwalker doesn't just become you, it watches, waits, learns until it knows what you fear, what you hide, what makes you human. And when it learns enough, it doesn't need to kill you anymore. It just replaces you. Word count conclusion. I wish I could tell you this story ended with closure, with the creature defeated, the canyon sealed, and the names of the dead carved into some memorial. But the truth is harder to live with. The canyon remains, the pit remains, and whatever slipped out of it, maybe it's still wearing Caleb's face, maybe it's already wearing mine. There's a wildlife fact I once heard, back when I was researching survival techniques for hikes like these. Mountain lions rarely roar, they scream like a human. It's the kind of fact you forget until it's 3 a.m. and you hear something just outside your window that doesn't belong. And there's another fact, less scientific, more whispered. In places like the Southwest, people speak of the Skinwalker not as legend, but as a neighbor, something you avoid, something you never speak of at night. I understand now. Whatever lived in that canyon wasn't meant to be seen. It didn't just hunt, it mimicked, it collected. And in some ways, the scariest part wasn't the chase. It was the realization that it had been watching for so long, learning, preparing. Maybe it came from the pit. Maybe the pit was made for it. But something about the way it used our words, the way it begged us to believe it, makes me think it doesn't know what it is anymore. And that should terrify you, because when something forgets it's a monster, it starts pretending it's you. I didn't want to go to Wild Hollow. It was my mom's idea. Some mandatory character-building summer program for teens with too much screen time and too little sense of direction. I was 17, and like everyone else in the van, I'd rather be doing literally anything else than spending 2 weeks in the desert canyons of the Four Corners region, away from Wi-Fi, pizza, and air conditioning. There were 12 of us, packed into an old, rattling shuttle van driven by a stone-faced ranger named Derek. Most of the others were from cities: Phoenix, Denver, Albuquerque. A few were younger, maybe 14 or 15. Everyone kept mostly to themselves. except a girl named Tessa who asked too many questions, and a boy named Marcus who tried too hard to be funny. I sat near the back, watching the landscape blur past. The terrain had changed from scrub brush to scattered mesas, then to something more jagged, ancient cliffs, dry gulches, and thick shadows that lingered beneath the rocks. The sun was brutal out here, but the wind was oddly cold. Wild Hollow, Derek announced without ceremony as the van pulled off a dirt road. No signal, no roads, no visitors. You get lost, you stay lost. Not exactly a welcoming speech. The camp itself was more rustic than I'd expected. Just a few large canvas tents, a supply shed, and a fire pit. Surrounding us were tall pines, sagebrush, and the steep canyon walls that formed a natural enclosure. It felt boxed in, like the landscape was watching us. We were met by two counselors, Jan, an ex-military woman with short white hair, and Mason, younger, quiet, with dark eyes that never seemed to focus on one place for long. They handed out gear, knives, flint, water filters, and assigned us to tents in pairs. My tent mate was a guy named Kyle, older than me, probably 18. He wore a beanie, even though it was 95 degrees, and barely spoke. The first 4 days were what you'd expect from a survival camp. Fire starting, basic first aid, orienteering, plant ID, and lots of lectures about not touching cacti. They worked us hard during the day and let us rest at night, though rest meant sitting around the fire listening to Jan talk about grit and wilderness awareness. But on the 5th night, something changed. It was after lights out, just before midnight. I couldn't sleep, too hot, too itchy, too quiet. Kyle was already snoring. I slipped out of the tent to use the bathroom pit, which was a short walk past the cooking area. That's when I saw Marcus standing near the tree line, facing away from camp. "Hey," I whispered, unsure why I was whispering. He didn't turn around. I stepped closer. Marcus? Still nothing. Then he turned, just slightly, enough to show a part of his face. It was Marcus, all right. Same buzz cut, same hoodie, but his eyes looked blank. Not just tired, like he didn't recognize what a face was supposed to do. He stepped backward into the trees and vanished without a sound. I waited, frozen. "Marcus?" I called again. Nothing. When I got back to my tent, I didn't say anything to Kyle. I just lay there staring up at the canvas, listening to the wind, or what I thought was wind, rustling through the branches. In the morning, Marcus was already at breakfast, off cracking jokes about oatmeal. He looked normal. He sounded normal. But I knew what I'd seen. Later that day, I pulled Tessa aside during our fire building lesson. "Did you see anything weird last night?" I asked. She narrowed her eyes. "Weird how?" "I thought I saw someone walking near the trees, but they didn't respond when I called them." She hesitated. "Okay, that's weird, but not surprising. This place gives me a weird vibe. It's too quiet. No birds." I hadn't realized it until she said it, but she was right. Not a single bird call. No squirrels, no rustling critters, just wind and silence. We tried to forget it. That night, Jan took us on a night hike. No flashlights, just moonlight and a single lantern between us. She was big on trusting your instincts. We walked in a line through the trail that wound around the canyon rim. That's when it happened. One of the younger kids, Diego, let out a high-pitched yelp and pointed down toward the path below the ridge. "There!" he shouted. "That was me!" Everyone froze. "What are you talking about?" Mason asked calmly. "I saw someone down there," Diego said. "He looked just like me. He even had my shirt. He was looking up at me." Everyone laughed it off. Even Jan. "Probably your shadow," she said, "or your reflection in a puddle." But there were no puddles. It hadn't rained in days. Back at camp, Diego refused to sleep alone. He moved into Tessa's tent. I stayed awake longer that night, listening. And just before I finally dozed off, I heard something faint from outside. Elijah's name. It wasn't loud. It wasn't angry. But it was said in my own voice. The next morning, I told myself it had been a dream, that I was overtired, that my brain had looped my own voice back at me somehow. But when I stepped out of the tent, I found Tessa already waiting, arms crossed, a crease between her brows. "You heard it too," she said, not even phrasing it like a question. I didn't answer right away. "Last night, your name." I nodded slowly. "In my voice." Tessa exhaled hard through her nose. "Okay, so it's not just me." We kept it to ourselves. Everyone else seemed fine, grouchy from sore feet and heat, but not scared. Jan and Mason had split us into 3 teams for a navigation challenge. We were given paper maps and told to find a series of hidden flags spread across the high trail with no compass or GPS. It was supposed to build trust. Instead, it splintered it. Marcus's group never found their second checkpoint. They came back angry, blaming each other. One of the girls, Liv, claimed the map changed in her hands. No one believed her. She cried quietly at dinner while everyone else tried to ignore her. That night, things escalated. I woke to shouting near the mess tent. I scrambled out of the sleeping bag and saw Mason sprinting up the slope with his flashlight, Jan just behind him, barefoot. Tessa emerged a second later. "What's going on?" "I don't know," I said, pulling on my boots. We followed the light toward the mess tent, where Diego stood sobbing, hands in his hair, rocking back and forth. His voice cracked over and over. "It wasn't me. It wasn't me. I didn't do it." His shirt was torn, and one of his arms was scraped up bad, like he'd fallen or been dragged. Jan tried calming him down, but he wasn't responding. He just kept glancing behind himself, like expecting something to reach out from the dark. Eventually, Mason took him to the main supply tent and zipped the flap shut. After a while, whispers spread. Apparently, Kyle, my tent mate, was missing. They searched for him until sunrise. No luck. Jan said he probably wandered off in the dark and gotten lost. But that made no sense. Kyle didn't talk much, but he wasn't careless. He'd had a military-style habit of coiling his gear, even used a stopwatch to time his routines. By midday, Mason returned alone. No Kyle. That's when the atmosphere began to change. We all felt it. It was subtle at first, like the forest had tightened. The silence had weight, like it was watching us. On day 7, Marcus said someone had gone through his pack. His food wrappers were rearranged, and his socks were damp like someone had worn them in a stream. Liv admitted she heard someone walking around their tent at 3 a.m., but thought it was one of the counselors. That night, we tried to sleep in shifts. Jan and Mason agreed reluctantly. They were on edge too now, Jan especially, always looking over her shoulder during briefings, hands twitching near her belt where her knife hung. Tessa and I took second watch, seated near the fire pit, backs to the tent line. "You ever hear of a trickster spirit?" she asked softly, keeping her eyes on the fire. "You mean like a coyote?" I said. "Or a skinwalker?" The word made the flames feel colder somehow. "I thought that was just a story," I said. "Maybe," she replied. "But my grandma used to tell me things about spirits that get curious. They don't always want to hurt you. Sometimes they just want to see what it's like to be you." That thought sank into my stomach like wet sand. "What happened to your grandma?" "She stopped talking about it after someone she knew went missing." Tessa's voice dropped. Said something came back pretending to be him. It knew all the right words, but not the right timing, like it had learned the song but not the rhythm. The fire popped. Something cracked in the woods. We both turned. A figure stood beyond the tree line, maybe 15 feet away. It was tall and narrow, like a scarecrow, limbs too long, its head cocked slightly, as if studying us. I stood slowly, trying not to panic. "Mason?" I called. No response. "Jan?" The figure tilted its head the other way. Tessa grabbed my wrist. I blinked, and it was gone. In the morning, we found Jan's tent collapsed. Mason stood outside it, looking pale. He said she'd gone to scout the canyon edge and hadn't returned. Her boots were still inside. Now we were down 2 adults, and Diego wouldn't come out of his sleeping bag. Marcus started a fight with Liv, claiming she wasn't really Liv. Said he saw her talking to herself in the trees. Liv screamed and threw her water bottle at him. She left the circle and didn't come back. None of us slept that night. I tried to take inventory of who was still here, who hadn't acted strangely, but everyone was changing, whispering to themselves, glancing at shadows, repeating things we'd said the day before, word for word. Tessa and I made a pact to always sleep near each other, to check each other's hands for cuts or changes in voice. That night, I dreamed I was standing outside my tent, looking in. Inside, I was sleeping, and the version of me standing there smiled with teeth that weren't mine. Tessa woke me just before dawn, gripping my arm tight. Her face was pale in the low light, eyes wide and alert. "Don't talk, just listen," she whispered. "Something walked past my tent an hour ago. It paused. It whispered your name." "Whose voice?" I mouthed. She swallowed. "Mine." That hit me like a stone in the chest. I rose, slow and quiet. Around us, the other tents remained zipped shut. Stillness hung thick, unnatural. Even the birds hadn't started. We grabbed our boots and tiptoed toward the water station, trying not to make a sound. A breeze stirred the trees, and for a moment I thought I heard the faint, eerie echo of my own voice laughing. We froze. It stopped. Back at camp, Mason was the only one awake. He looked tired, more than tired, broken. "She's not coming back," he said without looking up. "You don't know that," I said, voice quiet. "I do." He raised bloodshot eyes. "Because I saw her last night." My breath caught. She came back. She walked into my tent, sat across from me, but her eyes were wrong, empty. She smiled too long, repeated things we'd already said. Then she walked backward into the dark. Tessa whispered, "And you didn't follow?" "I didn't move," he said, "because I knew that whatever it wasn't Jan." That day he didn't lead drills, didn't call us together. He just sat near the fire, knife in his lap, waiting for something. Around midday, Diego emerged again, eyes sunken. He hadn't eaten in 2 days, and he kept muttering under his breath, things we couldn't make out. Marcus lost it first. "Stop mumbling," he shouted at Diego. "You think this is funny? You think you can just pretend nothing's happening?" "I'm not pretending," Diego said, in a voice flat and strange. "You don't even sound like you anymore." "Maybe I'm not," Diego replied. Marcus lunged, but Tessa and I held him back. Later, while the group sat silently around cold rations, I noticed something about Diego's hands. His left index finger was bandaged, except I remembered clearly, Diego was right-handed. He'd burned his left hand on the stove the first night, and Mason had bandaged it. Now it was the wrong hand. I pulled Tessa aside. "I don't think that's Diego." She didn't ask for proof. She just nodded. We made a plan. That night, while everyone slept, we'd take 2 of the emergency signal flares and hike down toward the canyon base. There was a ranger station on the map, 10 miles. If we moved fast, we could reach it by morning. But night fell faster than we expected. The sky went black, moonless, and the trees, they seemed closer now. Too close, as if they'd moved inward when we weren't looking. We packed light, water, headlamps, flares, protein bars. We left a note, though neither of us believed it would matter. Just after 2 a.m., we slipped out past the fire pit. That's when we heard it again. Our names? My voice, Tessa's voice, calling from different parts of the woods. We didn't stop, even when we heard footsteps behind us, even when the voice started to cry, even when it begged in my father's voice, "Please, don't leave me here." We ran. The forest opened slightly at the canyon rim where we paused for breath. Below, everything was shadows, jagged rock, moonlit paths too narrow to see clearly. We debated staying there till sunrise. Then we saw something moving between the trees, back where we came from. It walked on 2 legs, but limped. Its shoulders were hunched, and its skin, if it had skin, seemed wrong. Gray, veined, like paper soaked in ash water. Its head turned too far as it scanned the trees, sniffing the air. It stopped when it saw us. I gripped Tessa's hand. We didn't speak. The thing raised one hand and pointed at us, and in a voice that was mine, but somehow too perfect, it whispered, "Found you." We bolted downhill, boots slipping on the rocky path. The thing behind us, whatever it was, moved faster than it should have. We couldn't see it anymore, but we heard it. The mimicry, the footsteps, the awful groaning laughter that sounded like it was choking on words. Tessa ran ahead, flashlight bouncing wildly. I kept pace behind her, glancing over my shoulder every few seconds. Each time I expected to see a pale hand reach out from the dark or a twisted face lunging from the trees. But nothing came, only the sense of pursuit. We found a crevice near a cluster of boulders and slid in, backs pressed against stone. We turned our lights off and sat in breathless silence. Eventually the sound stopped. No steps, no voices, only our heartbeats. I don't know how long we stayed there. The night stretched forever, and in that stillness, a creeping realization took hold. It didn't need to chase us. It could wait. Mimicry, I'd read somewhere, was the oldest predator trick in the wild. Some birds mimic the calls of their prey. Some insects take on the color of poison. But this wasn't camouflage. It was identity theft. A shadow trying on a human skin and not quite fitting into it. Tessa leaned toward me and whispered, "I think it's learning faster." I nodded. "What if it doesn't need to replace us?" she continued. "What if it just wants to become everyone?" It was a horrible thought. I tried to shake it, to focus on something tangible. I remembered a survival fact from Mason's Day 2 speech. If you're lost, Always go downhill. Water runs down. Civilization follows water. So at first light, we followed the slope. The landscape opened to a dry riverbed flanked by cottonwood trees. We drank the last of our water and kept moving, but I could tell Tessa was starting to fade. Her pace slowed, and she stumbled more often. Then we heard footsteps again, behind us. Measured, pacing, not running. I turned slowly. At first, nothing. Just the whispering leaves. Then I saw it. Something stood in the shadows beneath a bent tree. A figure, thin, tall, and swaying slightly like it didn't know how to balance itself. As we stared, it took a step forward. My breath caught. It was Jan. Same hiking vest, same scar on her cheek, but there was a hollowness in her eyes, and her mouth moved, forming words we couldn't hear. Then, slowly, she raised her hand and pointed at the sky. We looked up, instinctive, and when we looked back down, she was gone. Tessa started crying softly. "I can't do this anymore," she whispered. I squeezed her shoulder. "We're almost there." It wasn't true. I had no idea where we were. We kept moving. Sometime past noon, we reached a bend where the riverbed split. We chose the right fork, climbing over sandstone and brush until we spotted something glinting through the trees. A roof. Metal. A ranger station. We nearly collapsed at the sight. It was old, maybe a firewatch outpost, but the door was unlocked. We got inside, bolted it shut, and collapsed on the floor. It smelled of dust and kerosene. There was an old radio, but no power. Still, it felt like a victory. Until night came again, and something knocked on the door. 3 slow taps, then silence. Another 3. Then a voice, soft, measured, exactly like Mason's. "You kids in there? It's safe now. Come on out." Tessa didn't move. I whispered, "Do not answer." More knocks. Now Jan's voice. "We found the others. Everything's okay. You can come out." Then mine. "Hey, you in there? Please. It's cold." I shook. I couldn't help it. It knew too much now. And the worst part, it had all our voices. I whispered to Tessa, "Don't respond to anything, no matter what it says." She nodded, but I could tell she was starting to question reality. So was I. Then the voice outside changed. It became Tessa's. "Let me in," it said. "Please. He's not who you think he is." That was the moment I saw doubt cross her face. "Don't listen to it," I begged. "It's trying to break us apart." Tessa's lip trembled. "But what if I'm not me?" The question hit me like ice. What if it already got me and I just don't know it? I couldn't answer, because deep down I'd asked myself the same thing. We sat like that all night, listening, waiting, doubting. By morning, the knocks had stopped, but so had the birds. We opened the door slowly, prepared for anything. There was nothing there, just prints in the dirt, 3 sets, heading west toward camp. Tessa and I looked at each other. "We can't let it reach the others," she said. I nodded, and we began walking back. By the time we reached Wild Hollow again, the sky had begun to change, pale and overcast, as if the sun itself was reluctant to shine on this place anymore. Something was wrong. The air felt hollow, like a stage set after the actors have all left. The tents were still there, the fire pit cold, but no one stirred. We called out, but only our echoes returned. We checked each tent, empty. Sleeping bags torn, half-zipped, a shoe here, a crushed granola bar there, a journal, Diego's, lying face down on the grass. Tessa picked it up. "It ends yesterday," she said. I flipped to the last page. The handwriting looked shaky. They talk like us now, even during the day. One of them forgot how to blink. Mason tried to tie it up, but it laughed. It laughed using my voice. I think it's inside the group now, maybe more than one. "If I forget who I am, I'm sorry." That last line haunted me. The final handwriting slanted downward, the ink fainting. I looked around again, trying to sense where they could have gone. Why would everyone leave? That's when we heard the humming. Soft, low, like the start of a lullaby. It came from the woods near the latrine trail. We crouched and moved slowly toward the source. As we approached, the humming stopped. And then a voice called out, "Over here." It was Marcus, or someone wearing his face. He stepped into view, too stiff, too smooth. Tessa flinched. I whispered, "Stay behind me." He smiled off, like he was mimicking a photo. "We found a cave," he said. "That's where they went. You should come. You'll be safe there." I said nothing. He cocked his head. "You're scared. You shouldn't be. You're one of us now." And then I realized what was wrong with his mouth. He never blinked, never stopped smiling. Tessa whispered, "Run." We bolted toward the gear shed near the trailhead. Inside, we braced the door and slid an old hunting rifle from the emergency rack, It was dusty, unused, but still loaded. "Do we even know if this thing can be killed?" I asked. "I don't think we're dealing with a thing," she whispered. "I think it's more like a thought, something that wears people like clothes." We spent the next hour going through everything Mason had stored, field maps, old journals, and at the bottom of one footlocker, a leather-bound notebook wrapped in twine. The pages were fragile, handwritten in a mix of English and Navajo. Most were unreadable, but one entry had a sketch, a long-bodied creature with thin limbs and a sunken face. Beneath it, a note: "Do not let them speak. That is how they learn. That is how they feed." Another line: "In shadow they mimic. In moonlight they fracture." Tessa looked at me. "Fracture?" "Maybe light exposes them," I guessed. "Or maybe they can't maintain form under it." She opened the emergency drawer and found 2 unused flares. Then we tested. That night, we didn't sleep. We sat near the dying fire, the rifle between us, waiting, and just after midnight they returned. First came the sounds, branches snapping, whispers of conversation just out of reach. Then movement. I counted 5 shadows circling the edge of camp. I recognized all of them. Jan, Diego, Mason, Marcus, even myself. The imitation of me stepped forward first, smiling that same stretched grin. "You came back," it said, my voice exact. "We knew you would." "Why?" I said. "What do you want?" It tilted its head. "To become." The others nodded, in unison, like puppets. Tessa lit a flare. The moment the red light blazed, they shuddered, like oil rippling in a pan. Jan's figure blinked out for a half second, reappearing closer but less bold. Her mouth flickered. Diego's limbs began to jerk unnaturally, like a glitching film. I lit the second flare. The thing wearing my face began to scream, not in pain, but like static, its voice splitting in 2 registers at once. Then it lunged. Tessa fired the rifle. The shot echoed across the canyon. The bullet passed through the creature. No blood, no body collapse, just a sudden convulsion. Then it scattered into dozens of thin, stringy shadows that slithered into the trees. The others followed. Gone. The flare died soon after. We waited in silence, and then we heard something else. A cry, human, real. We found Mason near the trail, unconscious but breathing. His leg was broken, but he was alive. When we woke him, his eyes filled with tears. "They tried to take my face," he whispered, "but I wouldn't let them. I remembered my name. I remembered my father's name. That's what saved me." We got him to the ranger outpost by midday. It was a brutal hike, but the rifle helped us feel safer. By evening, a search team found us. They didn't find the others, just empty tents and strange impressions in the dirt. We told them what we could. They didn't believe us, not really. But they also didn't ask too many questions. The following week blurred. Rescue officials took statements, therapists asked questions, and news stations played polite versions of the story. Wilderness trauma leads to teen disappearance. But I knew the truth, and so did Tessa. They weren't missing. They had been taken. Or worse, become something else. Tessa and I kept in touch, but neither of us spoke about the nights in the canyon, not directly. Every now and then, I'd text her, "Do you remember the flare?" She'd reply, "Yes," every night. But a month later, she stopped responding. Then one evening, I heard her voice, outside my house, calling my name, exactly like that night in the canyon. I didn't answer. I turned off the lights and waited. By morning, she was gone. That's when I realized it wasn't over. Not for me. So I went back. I know what you're thinking. Why return? Why go back to a place that nearly erased me? Because sometimes the only way to beat something is to understand it. The canyon was quieter than before. The ranger outpost had been boarded up, the trailhead posted with "Do Not Enter" signs. I ignored them. I made my way down the old dry riverbed, past the shattered flare remains toward the cave Marcus, or what War Marcus had mentioned. I didn't know if it was real, but I needed to find out. It took me hours, but eventually I found it. It was smaller than I expected, hidden behind a wall of scrub oak and dead juniper. The entrance was narrow, just enough to crawl through. Inside, it opened into a space the size of a living room. The walls were carved smooth, unnaturally so. I found no bones, no scraps, no blood. Just one thing, a mirror, not glass, polished obsidian fused into the stone. And standing before it, me, not a reflection, another me. I should have run, I should have screamed, but I didn't, because it didn't move. It just stared, mimicking every breath, every blink, every tiny twitch, perfectly. And then it smiled. I hadn't smiled. Not in weeks, it spoke. Do you remember the flare? My legs froze. It was the same phrase I used with Tessa, the same intonation, the same rhythm. I whispered, "Where is she?" The thing tilted its head. "Who?" It took a step forward, and its smile fell away. "You've seen too much," it said. "That's not how this works." Another step. The shadows behind it began to stir, multiple outlines, none fully formed, arms where they shouldn't be, faces shifting with each movement. I did the only thing I could. I pulled the emergency flare from my jacket, struck it, and tossed it into the cave. The red light filled the chamber, and the scream that followed wasn't a sound. It was pressure, a physical push of despair and rage, and something older than language. I turned and ran. Behind me, the obsidian shattered. The scream didn't stop. When I finally reached daylight, the scream cut off, like a switch. And the silence that followed was deeper than before. I stumbled back to the trailhead by dawn, covered in scratches, half delirious. They found me there, rangers again, with concerned faces and walkie-talkies that didn't work. I told them I'd gotten lost. They didn't believe me, but they didn't argue either. I never saw the other version of me again. But sometimes I think about the mirror, how long it had been there, and how many others had looked into it. How many hadn't come out? I left Four Corners that same week, packed a bag, deleted my old accounts, moved to a city where no one knew my name. The authorities had stopped asking questions. Mason recovered physically, but he refused to speak about what happened. I heard he left the Forest Service for good. I tried to forget, but forgetting doesn't come easy when you're constantly checking your voice in recordings, your face in mirrors, your gait in security footage. Am I walking like me? Is that really my laugh? It wasn't paranoia anymore. It was vigilance. I kept seeing familiar faces in unfamiliar places. A bus driver who looked just like Marcus but didn't blink during the whole route. A woman on the sidewalk whose smile stretched a beat too long. A child at a park calling out to no one using my voice. I avoided mirrors. I stopped video calling anyone. When people asked what I did for fun, I lied. When they asked where I was from, I said I didn't know. Because the truth was, I wasn't sure I ever left the canyon. I started dreaming of it again. The dry riverbed, the polished obsidian, the whispering voices trying to remember how to be human. In one dream, I walk into the cave and find a campfire burning. Around it sit all the people who went missing. Diego, Jan, Tessa, even Mason. Their faces are smooth, too smooth. Their voices echo inside my head, not from their mouths. "You remember us, don't you?" they ask. I always wake up gasping. Then, 2 months ago, I saw a video online. A backcountry YouTuber, young, ambitious, talking about a haunted cave system near the Four Corners. The thumbnail showed the entrance I had crawled through, the same scrub oak, the same bend in the riverbed. My heart stopped when I played the clip. At 3 minutes in, the vlogger turns the camera on himself and says, "If I don't make it out, tell my sister I." Then his face shifts, only for a frame, but I saw it. The eyes turned completely black, and he smiled. Not a YouTuber's smile, a perfect, unmoving imitation. I closed the laptop. That night, my front door rattled. 3 slow knocks. I didn't move, but my phone lit up with a message from an unnumbered the flare. They were out now. Not just shadows in a canyon. They were learning, and they had mirrors everywhere. So I did the only thing I could. I started writing. This story, every detail I can remember. Every warning I wish I'd heard. Because if you're reading this, it means you've come close to them. Or maybe they've already found you. Maybe you're noticing things, like voices echoing in places they shouldn't, or friends pausing just a second too long before they answer your name. Here's what you need to know. Never follow someone who talks like you. Never trust a version of someone you love that shows up in the dark. And if you ever find a mirror that doesn't reflect exactly what it should, break it. Don't blink. And for the love of everything still human, do not answer. Concluding paragraph. I used to believe that identity was something fixed, anchored by memory, history, and the people who knew us best. But the canyon taught me otherwise. It showed me how thin that skin can be, how easily a name, a voice, even a soul can be worn like a borrowed coat. The creatures out there, if that's even the right word, aren't monsters in the traditional sense. They're imitators, listeners. They don't chase you. They become you, piece by piece, word by word. They wait for you to let your guard down, to forget yourself just long enough for them to slip in. The truth is, most people don't vanish screaming. They disappear in whispers, slowly erased by something that knows them just well enough to replace them. And the worst part? No one notices, because the copy is good enough to get by, good enough to laugh in all the right places, good enough to tuck itself into your life like it was always there. You'll only know if you look closely. So please stay vigilant. Keep your mind sharp, your story straight, your reflection honest. Don't let the noise of the world drown out the sound of your own voice. Remember who you are. Remember where you've been. And if you ever hear your own voice in the woods, calling you from just out of sight, don't answer. Because if it's not already inside you, it's getting closer. The plains of central Utah stretch wider than the eye can hold. Land that breathes in silence and exhales wind. That's why I moved here. 10 years back, after my brother died and the noise of people became too much, I took what little I had, bought a neglected patch of land an hour from any paved road, and started raising cattle. It was a simple life, good in its own hard-edged way. I had the land, the animals, and time enough to listen to nothing but the wind rustling through the dry scrub. No neighbors, no machines, no voices except my own, just me and the herd. My cattle were mostly Herefords, reddish-brown bodies, white faces, and mild as prairie dogs, reliable, predictable. That's why I noticed it right away when things started to change. At first, I thought it was just my imagination. I'd walk past the pasture before dawn and catch one or two of them, always the same pair, standing stock still facing the ranch house, eyes locked in my direction. Cows don't stare like that. Not at people, not for long. It made my spine itch. They didn't blink. Not when I waved my hand, not when I shouted. But the moment I looked away and glanced back, they'd gone back to grazing as if nothing happened. I told myself I was tired. I'd been waking earlier, staying up later. One of the windmills had seized up, and I was hauling buckets by hand from the spring. But even exhaustion has limits, and it wasn't just the staring. 3 nights in a row, I woke to a sound like dry coughing, raspy and hollow. The strange part was that it came from the southern field where the cows sleep. You ever hear a cow cough? Not like this. This sounded wrong, too human. I told myself it was the wind. Out here, the wind plays tricks. But on the 4th night, I went out with a flashlight, shotgun in hand. The field was quiet when I got there, too quiet. My herd, all 57 head, were clustered tightly together, tighter than they ever had before, like children huddled from a storm. And in the center of them was one cow, standing apart from the rest. It wasn't grazing, wasn't blinking, just standing. Its head was tilted at a slightly wrong angle, like someone mimicking the posture of an animal from memory. When I stepped forward, the others moved aside, slowly, cautiously, as if they didn't trust the thing either. I raised my light. The cow didn't flinch. Its eyes were wrong, too round, too reflective, and they weren't watching the ground or the grass or the other animals. They were looking right at me. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on my porch with the shotgun across my lap and waited for morning. That day I counted every head of cattle 3 times, 57, all accounted for. I even tagged them again. But that one cow, tag number 46, I kept my eyes on. I fed them early, walked the fence lines, checked the pens. Everything was quiet. Too quiet, if I'm honest. The animals weren't eating, not really. Some would mouth the hay and let it drop. Some just stood, watching the horizon as if waiting for something. But number 46 didn't move at all. That night, the air got still. No wind, no insect hum, no moon. And around 2 a.m., I heard something again. Not coughing this time. It was a whisper, low, guttural, like someone speaking through dry leaves. It came from the barn. I went out again, boots on, gun loaded. The dogs wouldn't come. They growled at the back door, ears pinned but refused to follow. That scared me more than anything else. I crept toward the barn. Each step felt heavier. My flashlight flickered as I neared the door. I thought about turning back. Then I heard my name, not shouted, whispered, from inside the barn. Cal. I froze. My blood turned to ice. No one knew I was out here. No one had said my name in weeks. I swung the door open, nothing. Just hay bales, shadows, the scent of cattle. But then I saw it. Tag number 46, standing upright in the corner. I don't mean standing tall like a cow might when startled. I mean upright, 2 legs. hooves pressed together like a man trying to balance. Its head twitched toward me, I swear to God. Then it fell, hard, like it had no bones. I blinked, and when I opened my eyes, it was on all fours again, mooing softly, as if nothing had happened. I didn't move, I didn't breathe. I just backed away, step by step, gun shaking in my hands. Back in the house, I locked every door and window, but I didn't sleep, because whatever that thing was, it wasn't one of my cows. And I was beginning to think maybe it never had been. Mornings on the prairie usually bring relief. The sun climbs slow but sure over the hills, melting away the shadows of the night. But that day, the dawn did nothing to settle my nerves. I watched the field from my porch, coffee untouched and cooling. The herd moved sluggishly like they were underwater. And number 46, God help me, it was staring again. I didn't go out right away. Something in my bones told me not to. Instead, I called Doc Harlan, an old vet who lived up near Vernal. Told him the cows were acting strange, not eating, some staring, maybe infected with something. He laughed. What, you finally caught prairie madness? I pushed harder, said it was serious. Eventually, he agreed to come by the next afternoon. After the call, I finally worked up the courage to go down to the pasture. I walked slow, eyes on each cow as I passed, looking for anything wrong. That's when I noticed the prints. A trail of them led from the fence to the creek. They were hooved, mostly, but not like the cattle's usual scatter. These were in a straight line, like a biped, and they were deep, too deep. Something heavy, far heavier than a cow, had walked there. I followed them until they vanished at the water's edge. The brush around the bank was flattened, like something had crouched there, watching. Returning to the pasture, I saw the calf was missing. Little Tilly, barely 6 months old, spotted hide, one limp ear. Sweet thing, still learning to walk straight. She was always close to her mother. Now her mother stood alone. No sound, no searching, just stillness. I searched the perimeter, every fence line, checked the shed, the barn. No sign, no blood, no broken boards, just gone. I spent the day pacing the field, trying to convince myself there was a rational explanation. Predators, illness, a thief maybe, but none of it fit. That night I stayed outside, shotgun resting across my lap, floodlights aimed at the pasture. It was cold, windless. Around midnight I heard it again, that whispering. But this time it wasn't coming from one direction. It was everywhere, soft, raspy voices swirling in the air, echoing just beyond understanding. The cows started to move, not all of them, just a few. 5, maybe 6. They peeled off from the herd and began to wander in loose circles, slow, disjointed, like they were dancing to music only they could hear. And then, laughter, high-pitched, gurgling, definitely human. I scanned the field with my flashlight. Tag number 46 stood at the center of the circling cows. It turned its head, slow, too slow, and locked eyes with me. That's when it opened its mouth. And I don't mean mooed, I mean it opened its jaw wide, wider than any bovine ever should, and made a sound like static, like a radio caught between stations. It garbled and cracked, then shifted into something clearer. A voice, my voice. Cal, my legs nearly gave out. I pulled the trigger. The shot cracked through the night and the beam of my light scattered. When I looked again, the cows had stopped moving, staring. Every one of them turned toward me in unison. The only sound was the wind returning, as if it had been waiting its turn. I ran, locked every door in the house, shut the blinds, turned every light on. The dogs cowered in the basement, their tails between their legs. Sleep never came. By morning, everything was normal. Too normal. The cows grazed like nothing had happened. Tilly was back, standing near her mother. But she didn't move right. She moved like her joints didn't bend the same. And when I got closer, she let out a low bleat that sounded like a grown man sighing through clenched teeth. That's when I knew this wasn't infection, wasn't madness. Something had taken her. Doc Harlan arrived late that afternoon, all smiles and jokes until he stepped into the pasture. He grew quiet fast. He looked at a few of the animals, felt their sides, checked their teeth, lifted their hooves. These cows ain't sick, he muttered, but something's wrong. This one's heartbeat. It ain't steady. This one's too cold. That one. He paused. That one doesn't have a pulse. We both stared at tag number 46. It chewed grass slowly, watching us. I asked, what does that mean? Doc didn't answer. He packed up without finishing the inspection. Told me he'd call a university, maybe some folks from Salt Lake. But he didn't come back. I called him the next day. Line disconnected. That night I found one of the cows outside the fence, halfway buried in dirt, like something had tried to plant it. Its eyes were missing, but there was no blood, just clean, circular holes. I dragged the body into the barn. That's when I saw what was beneath the skin. Something black, thin and glistening, like roots or tendrils, wrapping around bones, threading into muscle. Like the creature inside the cow wasn't made of flesh, but of wire. I backed out of the barn, locked the doors, and threw the bolt across. I didn't want to know what was inside the others. I stood on the hill that night, watching the herd, and the herd watched me back. None of them blinked. The morning brought no peace, just quiet, heavier than before. That same unnatural fog hadn't lifted. It hung over the field like a second sky, thick and yellow-white, coating everything in dew and dread. I didn't step outside right away. Not after what I saw on the cameras, not after hearing my own voice echoing back at me from the barn walls, repeating things I hadn't said. But around noon, the fog thinned enough for me to make out movement in the pasture. Cows, or what I thought were cows, stood along the edge of the property. They weren't grazing, just standing, perfectly spaced like chess pieces on the first row of a game I hadn't agreed to play. And tag number 46 was missing. That shook me more than I'd expected. There was something deeply wrong with the fact that it had vanished. I couldn't explain why, but I felt like it had left rather than wandered off. Like it had some agenda now, something it was supposed to do. Still, I grabbed my rifle, slung on a coat, and made my way toward the barn, keeping an eye on those distant shapes. A few of them turned as I walked. Their heads moved slowly, the kind of movement you'd expect from a creature trying to mimic how humans look around, not because it had to, but because it was pretending. Halfway to the barn, I saw the prints in the dirt. They were cloven hooves at first, normal, but then they shifted. I traced them with my eyes. About 15 feet in, the hooves started to morph into something else, something more human. A split toe, then more defined arches, then clear heel pressure. Whatever it was, it had been walking upright by the time it reached the barn. Inside, the air was wrong. It smelled coppery, like rusted blood, but sweet too, like decaying fruit. I paused at the door, my finger tightening on the trigger. One step inside, and I froze. All the hay had been stacked into one massive mound in the center of the floor, neatly, unnaturally neatly, as though each flake of straw had been intentionally aligned, and placed on top, resting like a king on a throne, was a cowhide. Just the hide. No flesh, no bones. It had been peeled with surgical precision, and stuffed inside the hide, stitched at the neck and the ankles, was a deer. Its limbs curled backward like a fetus in the womb. Its mouth was open in a frozen scream. My knees locked. I backed away, turned, and sprinted toward the house. The barn door slammed shut behind me without wind. I didn't look back. Once inside, I locked every door and drew the blinds. Then I climbed to the attic where I kept my father's old CB radio. I hadn't used it in years, but I was willing to try anything at that point. I scanned channels, called out for help. Nothing. Then on channel 6, I heard a voice. Scratchy, low, hard to understand. Stay off the land. It remembers. I pressed the mic, almost shouting, "Who is this?" What remembers? But there was no reply. Just a long, wet breath, like someone exhaling through a broken windpipe. And then silence. I didn't sleep that night. Every few minutes I'd hear the voice again, not from the radio, but outside. Whispered between fence posts, murmured beneath floorboards. Sometimes it would repeat things I'd said earlier in the week. Sometimes it would say things I hadn't said yet. By dawn, I cracked. I needed to know what I was dealing with. So I loaded my truck with supplies, flashlight, bolt cutters, water, a flare gun, and drove toward the southern part of the property, where the land dipped into a gulch that hadn't been grazed in years. My father always said the cattle avoided it for a reason. As a kid, I thought that was just superstition. Now, I wasn't so sure. The fog grew thicker as I descended. The truck struggled on the incline, tires slipping on loose gravel. Eventually, I had to continue on foot. I followed a narrow trail that wound between dried creek beds and dead pines. The deeper I went, the quieter it became. Even the birds avoided this place. And then I found the second hollow, wider than the first, cleaner. At the center stood a shape. For a moment I thought it was a scarecrow, burlap arms outstretched, cloth hanging from shoulders, but as I approached I realized what it was. A stitched together form, cow legs, deer torso, human hands. The face was blank. No eyes, just a slit where the mouth should be. And it was breathing, shallow, rhythmic, like it was asleep. Then the wind shifted. It smelled me. The thing stirred, its limbs twitching with awful, jerky movements. I stepped back, heart pounding, and then somewhere behind me came a voice. You see now, you understand. I turned expecting a person, but it was another stitched thing, smaller, built from raccoon paws and rabbit legs, standing upright like a malformed puppet. Its head was a human jawbone with deer antlers wired to the top. It was smiling. I raised the flare gun and fired. The burst of red light caught the larger creature in the chest, setting its hide ablaze. It let out a scream, not pain but rage. The sound knocked me off my feet. I scrambled backward, bolted through the trees, sprinting until I could no longer hear it. When I reached the truck, it was covered in hoof prints, not just on the ground, on the hood, on the roof, on the windshield, like they danced on it while I was gone. I drove back fast, didn't stop until I reached the house. I thought about leaving, just packing up and abandoning the ranch altogether. But I knew the truth by then. This wasn't just a haunting, it was a test. They were practicing, trying to become, and they were getting closer. That night, as I tried to sleep with the lights on, I heard something scratching at the porch. When I opened the door, there was nothing except a cow skull. Inside it, my name carved into the bone. The next morning, I walked out to the field and saw only 10 cows. 10. I had 16 just a week before, and the one still standing there, spread in that wide circle again, looked worse, like wax figures left too close to a fire. Their legs were thinner, too thin to support their weight, their backs hunched, ears drooping unnaturally. But what really made me stop, made my stomach clench, was their eyes. They weren't reflecting the sunlight the way they should. They were absorbing it, like tar, black and bottomless. I shouted, hoping to trigger some response, some trace of normal behavior. Instead, all 10 cows lifted their heads at the exact same time, not startled, not curious, synchronized. Then every one of them took a single step forward. I backed up fast and nearly tripped over my own boots. When I reached the porch, I caught movement at the tree line, something low to the ground, four-legged, watching. Then it was gone. I stayed inside for the rest of the day. My radio stayed silent. My phone battery, which had been fully charged, drained in minutes. Every clock in the house had stopped. Even the analog one over the fireplace still stuck at 3:17. I hadn't noticed that before. And then, while reviewing the trail cams, I found something I hadn't seen the night before. A new clip. This one only 8 seconds long, timestamped for 3:17 a.m. It was aimed at the edge of the southern pasture. Fog rolling in, static flickering at the corners of the frame. And then it appeared. Not a cow, not even pretending to be one. A thing. A creature stitched from half a dozen animals, feline spine, canine legs, goat horns, crawling through the field on elbows and knees, the kind of movement that seemed almost human. It stopped near the camera, tilted its head, and then it opened its mouth. No sound came through the clip, but its throat bulged in and out, pulsing like a bellows. And after a moment, my own voice came through the speakers, clear as a bell. Saw you. I shut the laptop and paced the room for an hour. My breathing never slowed. My body wouldn't stop trembling. Then came the knock. 3 sharp raps on the door. I crept toward it, staying low, gun ready. Another knock, same rhythm. I peeked through the window. No one was there. But across the yard, all 10 cows were now standing by the fence, and one of them had my shirt in its mouth, the same flannel I had left in the laundry basket. I didn't sleep again. Couldn't. Not with the sense that everything, the land, the air, the silence, was waiting for something. I started digging through my dad's old notes. He wasn't much for writing, but he'd kept some journals, half-burned pages, and water-stained entries. Nothing organized. But in one near the back, I found this scrawled line. The herd isn't all cows anymore. It watches itself. That stopped me cold. The entry was dated November 3rd, 1989, almost exactly 36 years ago to the day. Another page showed sketches, badly drawn humanoid shapes wearing hides, crouched on all fours or standing with distorted legs. He'd written one word beside them over and over again: not rights. It sounded childish, like a placeholder term for something unspeakable, but it made sense in a way nothing else did. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, I made a decision. I would go back to the southern gulch, not to run this time, but to find the heart of it. Whatever was creating these things, guiding them. I set off at dusk, backpack filled with flares, stakes, salt, and a compass, though I doubted it would help. As I approached the gulch, something odd happened. The deeper I walked into the valley, the more the land bent, not just in shape, but in logic. Trees grew sideways, shadows fell in the wrong direction. Birds flew in spirals that never ended. I reached the bottom and saw it, a circle burned into the earth, charred bones arranged in spirals. In the center, a cow, alive but frozen, hooves buried into the soil like roots. It blinked once, its mouth opened, and my own voice came out again. We're learning. The ground beneath me groaned. From the shadows, more things approached, not animals, not men, half-made, bones exposed, faces covered in stretched hide. Their eyes shimmered silver, not from light, but from some strange mimicry of perception itself, like they were trying to see the way we see, but didn't fully understand how. They surrounded me without urgency, quietly, like I was a specimen, a guest, or a tool. Then one stepped forward. It had hooves, cracked and mismatched, but its body was long and sinuous, tapering into a tail stitched from cattle intestines. Its head was a skull wrapped in wire and human skin, and then it spoke, but not with a mouth. The words came directly into my head. The skin fits better each time. I screamed, or tried to. My voice never made it out of my throat. They moved closer, hands outstretched, not to grab, but to touch, to learn. I lit a flare and threw it. The circle caught first, then the bones. Flames raced through the spiral, igniting dried marrow and blood-soaked earth. The creatures shrieked, not in pain, but in confusion. They backed away, scattering into the woods, disappearing into the fog. I didn't stop running until I was back at the truck. When I got home, it was dawn, and all the cows were gone. Not a single hoofprint in the dirt, as if they'd never existed. Inside the house, things had shifted. The clocks now worked again. The air was lighter, the silence less alive. But something wasn't right. In the mirror, my reflection blinked a fraction too slow. I started wearing gloves inside the house. It sounds ridiculous, I know, but I couldn't stand the feeling of my own skin. It was like it didn't belong to me anymore. My hands didn't move quite right, like they were thinking just a split second ahead of me. I watched them carefully in the mirror, tried catching them acting independently. Once I did. My left pinky curled inward while the rest of my fingers remained still. No twitch, no cramp, just an intentional movement that I hadn't made. I wrapped it in duct tape and tried not to think about it. The worst part, I didn't trust my own animals anymore. After the herd vanished, I brought in 3 new cows, young, normal, or at least they seemed normal, until one night while feeding them, I heard a whisper. It came from just behind me, raspy and low. I spun around fast, flashlight raised. Nothing there. But one of the cows, Mabel, was staring at me with those black, that absorbing eyes. Just like before, she didn't blink, she didn't move. And when I turned the flashlight away and back again, she was 2 steps closer to the fence. I backed away, slowly, calmly, and locked the barn door tight. That night, I dug a pit behind the house, threw every journal, every drawing, every scrap of memory from my father's shed into it. All of it. Lit it up with gasoline and stood there until the last ember died. But it didn't fix anything. I kept waking up at 3:17 a.m. every night, always the same minute. Not 3:16, not 3:18, always 3:17. And every time I woke, I'd find something wrong. One night it was the door standing wide open. Another night, the shower was running. Once I woke up to find mud all over my boots and I hadn't left the house in 2 days. I began placing tape on the inside of the windows, thin black strips I could memorize. So I'd know if someone or something was moving them, but they never shifted. That's when I realized they weren't coming in, they were already here. I took a photo of myself just to confirm that I still looked human. The image was fine, until I zoomed in. One eye, the right one. The reflection wasn't right. It wasn't the room I was standing in. It was the pasture. But not as it looked now. It was burning. And in the fire I saw them, those things, the not rights, watching, studying. Then my phone crashed, refused to turn back on. That same week, the sheriff came knocking, said some hikers had gone missing 2 towns over, south toward Rabbit Valley. Said they'd been last seen walking near my property line. I told him I hadn't seen a soul. He looked at me like he didn't quite believe it. His hand rested a little too comfortably on his sidearm. "You hear anything strange lately?" he asked. I thought about telling him everything. The cows, the voices, the creature that mimicked me, the circle in the gulch. Instead, I said, "Just coyotes." He nodded, left, didn't come back. But that night, I found one of their backpacks in my shed, still zipped shut, still full of clothes, still wet. There hadn't been rain in 3 weeks. I didn't even question how it got there. I just burned it with the rest. By now, I was sleeping during the day and staying awake at night. But the line between the two kept thinning. My dreams bled into waking life. I'd find myself standing at the back fence, staring into the dark, not remembering how I got there. I placed mirrors outside the house, facing outward. My theory was simple. If they were trying to imitate us, they'd hate being seen as they truly were. Mirrors showed truth, didn't they? Except they didn't. I watched the reflections for hours, but what I saw in them didn't match the land. The moon would be full outside, but just a sliver in the glass. The wind would blow right to left, but the grass would bend left to right in the reflection. Worse, my reflection wasn't always alone. Once I saw two of me, one standing, the other smiling, and then the reflection of me put a finger to its lips. Shh! I shattered every mirror I owned, and still, it wasn't enough. The real breaking point came when I looked outside at dawn and saw the herd again. Back from wherever they'd gone. 16 strong, they stood perfectly aligned, perfectly still. And behind them, walking upright now, were 3 others. Not cows, not even pretending anymore. They were tall, lanky, draped in mismatched skin. One had a cow's face sewn to a human skull. The second wore a stitched mask of bark and bone. The third, it didn't wear a face at all. But they were watching me, every single one of them. And then, as the sun broke the horizon, they did the impossible. They waved, all 16 cows, at once. They raised their front legs, like people, and waved. And that's when I knew what my father had meant. The herd isn't all cows anymore. It watches itself. They were trying to blend in, to learn, to replace. And they were almost there. Something changed after that morning. The silence around the ranch took on a weight I'd never known before. It wasn't just the absence of noise, it was waiting. It felt like the land itself was holding its breath. The wind wouldn't blow unless I stepped outside. The birds stopped singing whenever I opened a window. Even the insects avoided my porch light, as if I'd become something that shouldn't be acknowledged. And the herd, it didn't leave. They stood motionless in the same exact formation every day. At night, they'd vanish. No hoofprints, no scuff in the dirt. Just gone until the next sunrise when they'd reappear right where they had stood the day before. A little closer to the house each time. Eventually, I boarded the windows. Not for them, but for me. I couldn't bear to keep seeing what stood in the field, watching. There was no one left to tell. I had stopped answering my brother's calls. Didn't go to town. I rationed the last of my canned food and barely touched the water. Every time I moved too quickly, I caught a glimpse of myself in the corner of my eye, but twisted, slouched, grinning when I wasn't. I tried filming the field once, set up an old DSLR camera, fixed it on the herd, and walked away for an hour. When I checked the footage, it was just black. Not corrupted, not damaged, just featureless black. Until the very end, when the recording stuttered and caught a single frame of my own face, staring into the lens inside the barn. I hadn't left the house all day, and I hadn't gone into the barn since the backpack showed up. Something had taken my shape, and it had been inside. I slept with a hammer under my pillow that night. If you could call it sleep, I drifted in and out of a kind of twilight daze. I'd hear tapping at the walls, low moans in the floorboards. Once, I swear I heard my mother's voice whisper my name through the sink drain. The next morning, the cows were gone again, except for one. It stood near the fence, head low. A soft sound, barely audible, kept pulsing from it. I stepped outside, hammer in hand. The closer I got, the more I realized it wasn't mooing. It was breathing. And then it spoke, not clearly, not even in words, just syllables. Human-like but broken. And not in my voice, but close enough to send something cold through my spine. "Let you in." That's what it said. Then it turned and ran, not like a cow, but upright, into the tree line, its limbs bending wrong, body too narrow and tall. I didn't chase it. I couldn't. Something snapped inside me that day. Whatever resistance I had left, it burned out like a cheap fuse. I locked the doors, sealed the chimney, and waited. They were coming, not just to observe anymore, to enter. That night, I heard the front door creak open. I knew I'd locked it. I crept down the stairs, hammer shaking in my hand, and there, standing in the center of my living room, was me. Same clothes, same hair, same old scar above the eyebrow, but not quite me. The thing was breathing, but its chest rose and fell with no rhythm. Its eyes were glassy, reflecting not the room but the outside pasture, lit by a cold silver moon that wasn't shining that night. It looked at me and grinned. Almost done, it said. I lunged. I swung the hammer with everything I had, and it passed straight through, like smoke, like memory. The copy vanished with a shriek that sounded like metal tearing. The house shook, windows exploded inward, and all the lights went out. When I woke, it was morning. Everything was untouched. No broken glass, no open door, no footprints, just me. Standing barefoot in the pasture, surrounded by 16 cows. Except now, I couldn't tell which one had been real, which one had ever been. One of them turned to look at me, and its face was my face, smiling. The others followed. One by one they turned, revealing their patchwork hides, their stitched skin, their 2 human limbs hidden under slack fur and bone. They didn't attack. They watched, like they were waiting for me to make the next move. That's when I realized I had been part of the experiment all along, maybe since the beginning, maybe even before my father died. That's why he'd left me the journals, the sketches, the warnings. He'd seen what I would become. He hadn't died of fear. He had taken himself out before they could finish remaking him. And now they were doing the same to me. I don't leave the house anymore. I don't speak out loud. And I never look in the mirror, because I've seen it once too many times. My reflection tilting its head the wrong way, not copying me, leading me, showing me the next step in their design, replacing what little human remains. The hollow herd isn't just out there, it's inside. And soon one of them will come knocking again, wearing my face just a little too well. When it does, I don't think I'll stop it. I think I'll let it in. After all, isn't that what I wanted? To belong? To not be alone? To be part of the herd? Word count. Word. If you ever find yourself driving the desolate roads across southern Utah, past the fences that seem to guard nothing, past the crumbling barns and sun-bleached signs, stop for a moment, roll down your window, turn off the engine, and listen. If you hear only silence, keep moving. But if the wind carries whispers that sound too much like voices, or if you spot a herd of cattle standing too still, facing the same direction at once, don't look them in the eyes. Whatever they're becoming, they're almost finished, and if you stare too long, they might choose you as the next model. They say the Four Corners region holds something ancient beneath its red dust and whispering pines. Where Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, and Utah meet, the land folds into itself, deep gorges, unmarked paths, and vast, tangled forests that appear on no satellite map. That's where we were headed. There were 5 of us in total. Simon, the expedition leader, Mariah, a survivalist and tracker, Jules, a quiet but brilliant geologist, Ben, a tech guy with more drones than patience, and me, Elena. I was brought in as a documentarian. My job was to record everything, but I never imagined I'd be the one left to tell the story. Simon said we were investigating a geophysical anomaly, something about electromagnetic pulses interfering with aircraft instruments. He had a map and a list of coordinates printed on worn paper with the corners curled. We're not the first ones to look into this. He told us on the first day, but we'll be the ones who come back with proof. He was convincing, calm, steady, almost too composed. The rest of us followed without much question. After all, he'd worked with several research teams before. His references checked out, and something about his voice made you want to trust him. We parked our trucks where the dirt road ended and loaded our gear onto our backs. It was mid-autumn, and the air was dry, cool, and unsettlingly still. The sky was gray, thick with clouds that never moved. No birds, no bugs, just the crunch of boots on pine needles and the occasional distant rustle we chalked up to deer or wind. By the time we reached the first camp spot, about 6 miles in, we'd settled into an easy rhythm. Ben deployed one of his drones to scan the tree canopy while Jules took soil samples. I filmed everything: faces, gear, trees, and Simon sketching symbols into his notebook. That night, the fire crackled too loudly, or maybe the forest was just too quiet. We ate in silence mostly, but when the talk started, it was Mariah who voiced it first. "Doesn't feel like a normal forest," she said, chewing a strip of dried meat. "Tracks are off. Heard something circling earlier." "Cougars, maybe," Simon said with a shrug. "Or coyotes." "I know what coyotes sound like," she muttered. "These weren't coyotes." Simon didn't argue, just stoked the fire, then looked at me. "Keep filming," he said softly. Later that night, I woke to a sound I couldn't quite place. Not footsteps, not animals, more like humming. A long, low sound that made my stomach turn. It came from beyond the trees, too rhythmic to be wind. I unzipped the tent just a little. Simon was awake too, sitting at the edge of the firelight with his back to me. His silhouette was perfectly still. He didn't turn when I whispered his name, didn't flinch when the humming grew louder. I lay back down and told myself I was imagining things. Just nerves. First night jitters. But that sound stayed with me long after it stopped. Not because it was frightening, because something in it felt familiar. The next morning, everything seemed normal again. Almost too normal. Our voices felt louder in the silence. The birds still hadn't returned. Jules said her compass had spun in a full circle twice during a walk to the stream. Ben's drone feed cut out halfway through a perimeter scan. He blamed interference from Simon's strange electromagnetic readings. Simon just smiled and said, "It means we're close." I started noticing other things too, like how Simon's map didn't quite line up with any GPS readout, or how he always seemed to know which trail to follow, even when there wasn't one. That second night, Mariah came back from her solo perimeter walk, pale and tight-lipped. "There were prints," she said quietly, glancing at Simon before turning to me. "Not human, not animal, but big, wrong." Simon said nothing, just stirred the fire. No one slept well. I reviewed some footage after everyone turned in. My camera had picked up something I hadn't noticed. During dinner, in the corner of the frame, a shape passed behind Jules, too fast to identify, but tall. Not quite human, not quite anything. I paused the frame and zoomed in. It looked like it was crawling upright, long limbs bent in strange ways. I told myself it had to be an artifact, glitch, a shadow maybe. But in my gut, I knew it wasn't. The forest felt like it was closing in, tighter with every mile. Every step forward felt like we were walking into something that didn't want us there. But Simon, he seemed energized, like whatever was out there was calling him. I thought maybe he was just obsessed. I didn't know he was leading us into it. Branches cracked in the darkness like brittle bones. At first, I thought it was just Ben wandering off to pee. Then I saw his shadow pacing the edge of the camp, and another shadow following, mimicking each of his movements half a second later. But Ben was alone. That morning, he didn't come back. We found his tent zipped open, gear untouched, and his drone case still locked. No blood, no tracks, no note, just gone. Mariah was the first to react. She drew her knife and circled the camp perimeter in growing spirals, eyes flicking between trees, blade tight in her grip. Jules was quieter, checking the map, the GPS, the compasses, none of which pointed the same direction anymore. I hovered near my camera bag, reviewing footage from the night before, hoping maybe something had caught that second shadow. Simon didn't seem shocked, not even concerned. "He probably wandered off, got disoriented," he said. "We'll find him." Mariah spat on the dirt. "No chance. He would have come back." "I said we'll find him," Simon repeated, louder this time, tone clipped. It was the first time I felt afraid of him. Still, we set out to search. Mariah took point. I trailed behind with Jules, and Simon walked silently at the rear. No one talked. We each scanned the woods, but the silence was deafening. It didn't feel like we were searching for Ben. It felt like we were being watched. An hour in, Jules whispered, "We've passed this rock before." "No way," I said. Simon said. "I don't care what Simon said," she snapped. "That's the same patch of moss, that curve, that scar in the bark. We're walking in circles." Simon stayed silent, but I caught the tiniest flicker of amusement at the corner of his mouth, like he wanted us to get lost. We headed back, or tried to. Mariah insisted on taking the lead. Her instincts proved sharper than GPS, and by dusk we found ourselves near camp again. "Still no Ben," But this time we found something else. Symbols. Etched deep into the bark of 4 trees surrounding our tents, crude, angular shapes that looked burned into the wood. They formed a rough square around our gear. In the center, something had left a pile of animal bones, stacked unnaturally, bleached white and picked clean. Jules lost it. This is a warning. Simon studied the markings, tilting his head. Not a warning, he said quietly. An invitation. Mariah grabbed his arm. What the hell is going on? He stared at her hand until she let go. We'll keep watch tonight, one at a time. We'll leave at first light. That didn't happen. Around midnight, Mariah woke me from my shift. I rubbed the sleep from my eyes and sat by the fire. Jules was already awake, sitting by herself with her arms wrapped around her knees, staring at the symbols on the trees. You hear it? She whispered. I tilted my head. Wind? No. It was like breathing, all around us, as if the forest had lungs. There's something out there, she said. I don't think it took Ben. I think it called him. She didn't say more, but she didn't need to. I felt it too. A pull, subtle but persistent, like a voice just below hearing level, telling you to go deeper. The fire flickered, and for a moment, I thought I saw movement at the edge of the light, something tall, thin, bending its joints the wrong way. But when I blinked, it was gone. That morning, Jules was gone too. Her boots were still there, her pack, her journal, her radio, gone without a sound. This time, Mariah confronted Simon directly. We leave now. He said nothing, just watch the trees. Then he pointed west, toward a grove of twisted pines. There's a fire watch tower 2 miles that way. Elevation should help. Mariah hesitated, then nodded. I didn't trust him, but the idea of being off the ground appealed to me. The forest no longer felt like a place. It felt like something alive. We hiked in silence, and when the tower appeared through the trees, I almost cried. The rusted stairs and cracked wood had never looked so welcoming. Inside, everything was layered in dust. An old cot, a desk, faded trail maps, and a journal lying open. I picked it up. Third member gone. Same way. No sound, no signs, just vanished. I don't think they're taken. I think they're copied. I saw one last night, just for a second, looked like Mike, walked like him, smiled like him, but the eyes, not right. It wasn't Mike. I don't think any of them are real anymore. I think it's wearing them like clothes. I stopped reading. My hands were shaking. Guys, I said, I think this happened before. Mariah skimmed the pages. Her face went pale. We need to leave, now. Simon didn't even look at the journal. Too late. That night, we barred the door and tried to sleep in shifts. I heard Mariah whispering to herself, or maybe praying. I didn't sleep, just stared at Simon. He never blinked, never closed his eyes, and at some point I realized he hadn't eaten. Not once since we arrived, not even when the rest of us did. He was watching us, waiting. Morning never came. I don't mean in the metaphorical sense. I mean the sun didn't rise. At first, we thought it was just thick clouds. The tower's window panes were fogged, the light a dull gray. But by noon, it was still twilight outside. The compass spun lazily in circles. Even the birds stopped singing. Mariah paced the floor like a caged animal. She hadn't said a word to Simon since the night before, but I saw the way her hand never strayed far from her belt knife. As for Simon, he just stared out the window. His face was expressionless, but it wasn't the calm of a rational leader. It was the stillness of something waiting to change. I took a moment to check my camera bag again, hoping to distract myself, but something was wrong. My memory cards were missing, every single one. Even the spare card I always taped inside the battery case. Mariah saw me rifling through my gear. Something gone? I hesitated. Yeah, my footage. She nodded slowly. They don't like being seen. The radio crackled. I hadn't touched it since Ben disappeared, assuming it was as dead as everything else out here. But now there was static, punctuated by a voice I couldn't place. Muffled, garbled, almost human. Then a whisper, low and urgent. He isn't what he seems. We both looked at Simon. His lips moved, almost imperceptibly, like he was repeating the message. Mariah moved fast. Knife out, she advanced on him. Who are you? She demanded. What the hell are you? He turned slowly, as if confused by the question. You brought me here, remember? You followed me. That's not an answer. He stepped toward her. Back. Off. Her voice was low, shaking. Simon didn't stop. He reached for her shoulder. She slashed. The blade cut across his forearm. It should have drawn blood. But instead of red, a dark, sludgy fluid oozed out, thick like used motor oil, and the skin around the wound began to knit itself back together. Mariah screamed. I stumbled back, hitting the wall of the tower as Simon lunged, not at her, but past her, toward me. Everything happened in flashes, the knife glinting in Mariah's hand, Simon's fingers closing around my wrist, cold and impossibly strong, the floorboards creaking beneath us as we struggled. Then Mariah tackled him, and all three of us crashed through the side of the tower. We hit the earth hard. My vision went white. When I opened my eyes, it was darker than before. Night had fallen for real, or maybe it never left. Simon was gone. Mariah groaned a few feet away, cradling her arm. I think I dislocated it, she gasped. But we have to move. We stumbled through the underbrush, heading downhill. The trees pressed close together, their shapes warped in the unnatural light. At some point, I realized we weren't walking in a straight line. We were being funneled. We emerged into a clearing. At the center stood a stone circle, half buried in the soil, moss-covered, but ancient-looking. Symbols just like the ones around our camp were carved into each stone, and standing within it were Ben and Jules, or what looked like them. They didn't speak, just stood side by side, eyes blank, as if waiting for instruction. Mariah reached for me. Those aren't them, I nodded. I didn't need convincing. Then Simon stepped into the ring behind them. Only he wasn't fully Simon anymore. His skin shimmered with an oily sheen, his movements boneless, shifting in jerks like a puppet on tangled strings. His face flickered, Simon's expression melting into others we didn't recognize. An old man, a child, a toothless woman, one after another. You followed me, he rasped, voice layered like multiple speakers playing at once. You led us, I shouted back. He tilted his head. You chose to come. You wanted the truth. The old things live here still. They need stories, shapes, skins. Mariah raised her knife again, trembling. What are you? We are the memory, he said, the echoes, the hunger that remains. Behind him, the shapes of Ben and Jules began to distort, arms too long, mouths stretching too wide, legs bending the wrong way. They began to crawl forward. Mariah pushed me behind her. Run! No, run! I did. Branches clawed at my face as I tore through the forest. I didn't look back. I couldn't. The screams behind me were short, choked off fast. I ran until my legs gave out. Then I crawled. Somewhere ahead, I saw light, dim, flickering, unnatural. Another clearing. At the center, a stone pillar rose from the ground, etched with more of those impossible symbols. A pool of still water shimmered at its base, reflecting nothing. Not the sky, not the trees, not me. Then I heard a voice, my voice, from the water, repeating the same words I had spoken into the camera on the first day of the expedition. We're heading into the woods near the Four Corners region, looking for the old stories, the myths. It played again, over and over, a loop, a trap. I backed away, heart pounding, and behind me, a whisper. You came here looking for truth. Don't look away now. I turned. Simon, if it was still him, stood in the trees, alone, watching, waiting. The wind had died. Not a leaf stirred in the clearing. I stood frozen, staring at Simon. If it was still Simon, his silhouette unmoving just beyond the tree line. In the absence of wind, his hair didn't shift, nor did his coat flutter. He was utterly still, as if a painting had been hung at the edge of reality. He didn't move. But I did. I took a slow step backward. Why us? I asked, my voice shaking. Why this team? He didn't answer. His head tilted slightly, not unlike a curious animal studying an unfamiliar prey. Then, without a sound, he stepped back into the forest, swallowed by shadow. I should have run. I wanted to run, but a deeper instinct took over. Something not born of reason, but of terror sharpened into clarity. I couldn't go any further into the dark, not without understanding what had really happened. Mariah, Jules, Ben, they were either dead or worse. But if there was even a sliver of a chance someone was alive, I had to find out. I took a breath, centered myself, and forced my legs to move, guiding myself back the way I came, using the faint trail of my broken branches and crushed foliage as a breadcrumb path. Each step was agonizing. Every snapped twig echoed like a shot. My flashlight flickered, its battery draining faster than it should. I returned to the stone circle, empty now. The figures that mimicked my friends were gone, but something else remained. A journal, one I recognized as Jules's. Its leather cover had a faded sunflower pressed into the front. She always kept it tucked in her chest pocket. I picked it up, slowly opening the damp pages. Her handwriting was unmistakable. The last few entries chilled me. Simon doesn't sleep. I've checked. Ben is acting odd. He whispers things when he thinks no one's listening, like answers to questions no one asked. Mariah said she saw something wearing Jules's skin. That's me. She meant me. We're all being replaced or erased. I'm not sure which is worse. I flipped to the final page. Only 3 words. It's not Simon. A sudden burst of wind ripped the journal from my hands and sent it flying into the darkness. I turned and ran, again. I don't remember how long I stumbled through the forest. Hours, maybe. The trees seemed to close in tighter. At one point, I swear they moved, reshaping the paths, turning me in circles. I marked a tree with a knife, then found it again 20 minutes later from the opposite side. Eventually, I came across a broken stretch of wooden fencing, ranch-style, weather-worn, half swallowed by the forest. Beyond it stood a dilapidated barn, completely out of place this deep in the wild. The structure sagged in the middle, covered in moss and vines, yet something about it felt watched. I stepped inside. Dust choked the air. The roof had partially collapsed. In the center, a strange stone table had been erected, much too heavy to have been moved here by hand. Around it were animal skulls, arranged in a perfect circle. Goat, deer, coyote, even something larger. Bovine, maybe. Symbols had been carved into the table, matching those I'd seen at camp and on the pillar. But it wasn't the table that stopped me. It was the recording device sitting neatly atop it, the same field recorder I'd used on the first day of the expedition. The play button was blinking. With a trembling finger, I pressed it. My voice crackled from the speaker. We're about to begin our trek into the uncharted forest region near Four Corners. 5 team members, 1 goal: uncover the local legends of disappearing travelers, whispers of skinwalkers, and ancient tribal wards. I'm optimistic. This will be... The voice cut out. Then another voice took over. Raspy, inhuman. 5 enter, 1 leaves. The shape remembers, the others feed. I dropped the recorder. A door slammed in the barn's back wall. I whirled around and saw Jules standing there. At least her shape. But her eyes, they were wrong. Solid black, reflecting no light. Help me, she said softly, her voice layered with a strange cadence. Don't leave me here. I backed up. She stepped forward. Then her face twitched, split. The flesh seemed to peel for a moment, revealing something beneath, a second face, not fully formed. No mouth, just skin stretching over what shouldn't be. You saw it, she whispered. She took another step, and the illusion fell apart completely. Her limbs grew too long, her spine bent at an unnatural angle, her jaw unhinged, revealing rows of jagged teeth that didn't belong in any human mouth. She let out a gurgling croak, then lunged. I ducked and bolted through the nearest wall panel, splinters tearing through my coat. I didn't care. I ran until my lungs burned. I kept running until the trees changed again. And I stumbled directly into our original base camp. The fire pit was still cold. No packs, no gear, just a piece of paper pinned to a nearby tree. I approached it cautiously. It was a printed expedition list. Our names, our roles, our photos. Only now, my name was crossed out. A new name had been written underneath it, in a scrawl that looked burned into the page. The last witness. I tore it down. Somewhere deep in the woods, I heard Mariah scream. But it wasn't just terror, it was fury, and then silence. The darkness around me thickened. My flashlight blinked once, twice, and died. I lit a flare. It bathed the trees in angry red light, shadows crawling across the branches like ink dropped into water. Then I saw them, not just one, dozens. Human silhouettes, all wearing familiar faces, all wrong. Some were frozen mid-step, others twitched as if glitching in place. One, I swear, was wearing Ben's jacket backwards, its arms reversed at the elbows. They began to move. I turned and ran once more, flare flickering in my hand. They didn't chase, they walked. Because they didn't need to run. They already knew I would end up where they wanted me. I found a dry creek bed and collapsed into it, heaving breaths that felt like fire in my lungs. My legs screamed from the strain, my palms cut and raw from grabbing trees and rocks in my blind sprint. I didn't care. At least here for a moment, I had a wall at my back and a clear line of sight above. No shadows could sneak up behind me. But that moment was fragile, already shattering as I caught movement atop the ridge. One of them, standing just at the edge of the slope, tilted its head down at me. It didn't approach, it simply watched. And in that silence, something inside me snapped, not from fear but clarity. I had to confront it. There was no other way. I backtracked. My feet moved on instinct, tracing the same broken trail I'd made before. I followed the pull in my gut, something deeper than logic, an internal compass that kept guiding me, as if the forest wanted me to return. And sure enough, I ended up right back at the barn. This time, I didn't hesitate. I lit another flare and stepped inside. The symbols on the stone table pulsed faintly in the flickering red light, as if alive, and beside them someone, or something, had etched 5 stick figures. 4 had been crossed out. 1 was circled. Me. "You came back," a voice said from the shadows. Simon. He stepped out from behind the stone altar. Same clothes, same face, but the expression he wore wasn't even trying anymore. The calm, warm-eyed team leader was gone. His smile was wide and cracked, and the eyes behind it were entirely black. "You were always the curious one," he said. "Curiosity feeds us." I clenched the flare tighter. "Why us?" He glanced at the table, almost wistful. "The forest remembers. You were marked before you even arrived. The moment you chose this region to explore, it chose you. All I did was guide you here. You're not Simon." "No," he said, voice low. "Simon died the first night. He screamed longer than most. I felt my legs buckle, but I didn't fall. I couldn't afford to. My flare hissed as I raised it higher, illuminating his features more clearly. His skin rippled, like water disturbed beneath a thin film. His smile widened inhumanly. "You took his face," I whispered. "I took his shape," he corrected. "You don't understand what we are. You think in terms of creatures, but we are memory, hunger. I wear your friend's face like bark on a tree, but the soul? Gone." He took a step forward. I backed into the altar. Symbols burned cold against my side. "What do you want from me?" I asked, eyes darting for any escape. "We want you to see," he said softly. "We want to know what it feels like to be the last, the one who remembers, the one who carries the horror." He lifted a hand, and the air grew heavy. From behind him, the walls of the barn began to bleed with shadow. More figures emerged, copies of Mariah, Jules, Ben, but broken, wrong. Their mouths gaped in silent screams. Some had too many teeth, others none at all, and all of them stepped forward in perfect, soundless unison. My breath caught. There was no way out now, unless I turned the forest's rules against it. I gritted my teeth and reached down to the flare's burning edge. I pressed the hot end into the dry wood of the altar. The flame caught instantly. The barn's mold-dried walls were eager fuel. Fire spread with terrifying speed. The Skinwalker's expression didn't change. "You think fire can stop us?" "I think truth can," I said, grabbing the field recorder from the table. I clicked it on. My own voice, recorded from earlier, spilled out, and then beneath it, that same guttural, inhuman whisper. 5 enter, 1 leaves. The shape remembers, the others feed. Their faces twisted in reaction. Some recoiled, twitching violently. Others screamed, not vocally, but with their mouths stretched impossibly wide, expelling a silent force that cracked the air. "You marked yourselves," I shouted. "You can't erase what's recorded. That's your weakness. Truth." The fire burst upward, licking the rafters. Smoke thickened. Simon, or whatever had warned him, stepped toward me, fury rising like heat waves from his body. The black of his eyes cracked, spidering across his face. I turned and ran through the flames, through the side wall as it collapsed. My coat caught fire briefly, but I rolled through the creek bed and smothered it. My skin stung and blistered, but I didn't stop. I ran until my legs collapsed under me, and this time when I awoke, I was in a hospital. They found me near the ranger station, alone, delirious, burned, barely coherent, no sign of the others, no trace of the camp, no barn, no evidence, except for one thing, the recorder clutched in my hand. When the authorities played it back, there was only static, and then the faint sound of 5 names spoken in sequence, followed by silence. I knew the names, I knew the voices, and I knew, deep in my bones, the Skinwalker hadn't died in that fire. It had simply shed its skin, again. I didn't return to my old life. How could I? I tried at first. Spent a few months with my sister in Flagstaff, sleeping on her couch, pretending that physical therapy appointments were the biggest hurdles of my recovery. But the nights betrayed me. I'd wake drenched in sweat, gasping, with echoes of whispers clawing at the edges of my hearing. Sometimes I'd find myself standing by the window at dawn, watching the tree line behind her house, not remembering how I got there. Worse, I noticed the animals acting strangely around me. Her dog, a gentle lab mix named Scout, would whimper and growl when I entered a room. Once I caught him staring at me through the crack of the door, eyes wide, hackles raised, unmoving for what must have been 30 minutes. It was as if something still clung to me, or watched through me. I left without saying goodbye, took what little savings I had, bought a rundown Airstream, and parked it on a remote patch of land near the edge of Moab, somewhere I could be alone, where I could see for miles, nowhere to hide, nowhere for them to watch from the trees. But even here, the silence isn't safe. It's too familiar. One morning, I found a stack of small rocks arranged outside my trailer door, 5 of them, perfectly balanced. I kicked them apart. The next night, they were back, different arrangement, still 5. That same day, I found the old recorder in the back of the Airstream's closet. I had thrown it away, personally. I remembered watching it fall into the hospital trash, broken and burnt. Yet there it was, untouched. I didn't press play. I buried it instead. But that night, I dreamed of Mariah's voice again. She was whispering something in a language I couldn't understand, then suddenly switched to English. "You were supposed to leave us behind, but now we remember through you." I jolted awake, my throat raw from screaming. Sometimes I question whether any of it was real. The fire, the shapeshifter, the disappearances. There's no news coverage, no evidence, no investigation. It's as if our expedition never existed. The Park Service denied ever issuing permits for the area we entered. When I reached out to Ben's family months later, they said he'd been working in Oregon. They showed me a photo of him smiling with friends at a brewery dated the same week he should have vanished. But it wasn't him. The eyes were wrong. The smile was too perfect, too worn. I think I know what the Skinwalkers are now. Not just monsters in the woods, they're parasites of form and memory. They become what we remember and erase what doesn't serve their design. We were led there, shaped by them, studied, and I am the failed test that got away. Maybe they let me. Maybe that's the point. To spread the fear, to be a vessel. I haven't seen them since that night, but I feel them. Every time the wind passes through the canyons with a voice not quite human. Every time I wake up in a different position than I fell asleep in. Every time I look in the mirror and have to convince myself that I'm still me. But the worst was 2 weeks ago. I caught my own reflection lagging behind, just for a moment, a blink of delay like a bad signal. That's when I knew. They're still learning, still watching, still inside me maybe, waiting for the right moment to take the last step. So if you're watching this, if somehow you found this footage, or if I send it to you and don't remember doing it, listen carefully. Don't trust me. Don't trust anyone who comes back from that forest. Don't follow the call to explore the 4 corners without asking who really invited you. And if you ever find yourself around a campfire and someone looks just a little too still, a little too perfect, and says something that makes the hair on your arm stand up, run, because the Skinwalker isn't always the one you don't recognize. Sometimes it's the one you know best, the one you trusted to lead you there, the one telling this story. I had been up in the Meseta Ridge Lookout for 13 days when the first call came. The tower was old but functional, perched high above the desert scrublands of northern Arizona. From the metal balcony, I could see out over miles of badlands, cracked red earth broken only by stubborn juniper trees and jagged cliffs. Most days were dry, uneventful, hot enough to make you think you were hearing things. I was up there alone. That was part of the job. Fire watch in the middle of nowhere. I was a 21-year-old ecology major fulfilling my summer field credit, and the job description was clear. Sit, watch, report smoke, check in twice a day via radio. I had brought books, a sketch pad, and a battered field recorder to pass the time. No phone service, no internet, just the occasional static-laced chatter from the ranger station 32 miles away. That first week, I loved it. The silence had a weight to it, a kind of peace that felt earned. I got used to the rhythm of dawn patrols and twilight radio checks. I logged the shapes of clouds and wrote bad poetry. The desert wasn't empty. It whispered if you knew how to listen. But on the 13th night, around 9:17 p.m., I received a call that wasn't part of the script. It crackled through the radio, soft at first. I was halfway through a can of chili and barely heard it over the hiss of my tiny propane stove. Mesita Ridge, come in, repeat, Mesita Ridge Tower. I leaned over and grabbed the mic. Mesita Ridge here. Go ahead. Static. Then, do you see it? The voice was male, calm, not familiar. The tone was strange, neither panic nor procedural. Say again? I asked. No answer. Just that eerie hum of old radio silence. The sound that fills your ears when something should be there but isn't. I repeated my check-in. Mesita Ridge here? Did someone hail this tower? No response. I logged the incident, per protocol. Wrote, unidentified voice transmission, 9:17 p.m., brief, non-threatening, possible interference from nearby tower. But something about it stuck with me. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe someone testing equipment. Maybe a ranger from a nearby site messing around. But the phrasing, it was so direct. Do you see it? I looked out the window then, just to check. Night had already settled over the ridge, and the moon hadn't risen. Everything below was ink black, windless, flat. A perfect, dead horizon. I thought I saw a flicker of motion down in the lowlands. Just a trick of the eyes, I told myself. Heat mirages could occur even at night, especially after long sun exposure. I made tea, sat back, shrugged it off. I didn't know then that it was the first call. The others were still coming. Around 11 p.m., I did my standard perimeter check. The tower itself stood on concrete stilts with a steel spiral staircase that wrapped around like a spine. Below that was hard rock and cactus, not much else. My eyes played tricks on me all the time, especially on long shifts. I wasn't concerned. But that night, the quiet felt pressurized, heavy, like something had pressed a dome over the entire ridge. One of the rules I'd learned from a survival instructor during training was simple. If the desert goes silent, pay attention. Predators move quietly. I didn't hear a single night bird, not even the wind between branches. I went back inside, shut the hatch, and locked it, just in case. A part of me still thought it was nothing. The other part of me couldn't stop staring at the blackness through the window. There was no moon that night, no clouds either, just the kind of dark that erases the horizon. When I finally lay down to sleep, I left the radio on, volume low. The white noise was comforting, until I heard it again. Mesita Ridge, come in. But this time it wasn't a man's voice. It was mine. My breath caught in my throat. I hadn't spoken into the radio in over an hour, and I certainly hadn't said anything that sounded like that. Mesita Ridge, come in, it repeated again, a little clearer this time. The inflection was unmistakable, down to the slight rasp I picked up whenever I spoke too long without water. I stared at the radio. My hand hovered above the mic, but I didn't press the button. Something deep in me said not to. Instead, I wrote everything down. Time 12:04 a.m. Message. My own voice heard on radio transmission. Repeated requests for check-in. I had to frame it like that. That's what the protocol demanded. Documentation, not emotion. Still, my hands were trembling as I scribbled the entry. I turned off the radio. It was a stupid move, probably a violation of some Park Service guideline, but I didn't care. There was no reason my own voice should have been playing back at me unless someone had been recording transmissions and looping them. Or unless something else was happening. I told myself to sleep, told myself it was just interference. I did not sleep. Instead, I sat by the window with my flashlight off, watching the stairs through a sliver in the curtain. At 1:15 a.m., I heard the first footstep. It wasn't loud, just a soft thud on metal. Then another, slow, deliberate. I pressed my ear to the floorboards. The sound was coming from below, from the spiral staircase that wound up the stilts. Someone or something was climbing. I didn't breathe. I just sat there, rigid, heart thudding like it wanted to burst through my chest. 3 more steps, then silence. I didn't go to the hatch. I didn't call for help. I just waited, staring at that rectangle of wood bolted into the floor like it might blow open at any second. But it didn't. Eventually, the sky began to lighten. The desert birds started singing again, almost guiltily, as if they were making up for lost time. I opened the hatch slowly, carefully, and pointed my flashlight down. There was nothing there. No footprints in the dirt. No equipment left behind. Just the same hard-packed red soil and the empty horizon. I radioed the ranger station at 7 a.m. My voice cracked slightly. This is Meseta Ridge reporting a possible intrusion near the base. No signs of forced entry, but I heard something on the stairs around 1. Can I request a flyover check? The voice on the other end was Ranger Doss, a man I'd spoken to only twice before. Gruff and efficient. Negative on the flyover, Meseta. We're short on air support, but I'll log the incident. Any visual confirmation? None, I admitted. But there was a strange radio message last night. Someone used my voice. A pause. Then just, copy that. Keep logging, keep listening. Sometimes desert does strange things. That was it. Keep listening. I spent the rest of the morning walking the perimeter with my binoculars. I looked for prints, odd branches, even disturbed rocks. But the desert didn't give anything away. It just stood there under the punishing sun, silent and indifferent. I went back up and rewound my field recorder, just in case it had picked something up. Nothing. Just wind and static. It would be nearly 24 hours before the second call came. But already, I knew this wasn't going to be a normal summer. Something was wrong out there, something the tower had been built to watch or contain. And now it was watching me. The second call came on the 15th night, 2 days after the first. That day had been uneventful in all the ordinary ways. Clear skies, no signs of smoke, the usual hawk circling low in the morning. I had finally gotten some rest the night before, though it was shallow and dreamless. I thought maybe, just maybe, I'd imagined that voice. Maybe the footsteps too, but deep down, I knew better. Around sunset, I climbed back up the tower after my patrol. The desert looked the same, but it didn't feel the same. I felt watched, not by some human down there on the rocks, but by the land itself. Like the canyons and arroyos had eyes and memories and old, cruel intent. There's a saying I'd read once, something native elders said about this place. Some things come through the cracks when the land gets too quiet. I didn't know if it was superstition or survival instinct, but I was starting to believe it. That night, I kept the radio off until 11 p.m. I don't know why I turned it on then. Some stubborn part of me wanted to confront it. Maybe I just didn't want to be caught off guard. I adjusted the frequency dial and let the static play low. For a while, it was peaceful, normal, the kind of quiet you can live with. Then, right around midnight, the radio clicked sharply, like someone had keyed the mic. Meseta Ridge, the voice said. It's looking at you. This voice was different. Neither mine nor the strangers from the first night. This one belonged to my mother. But that was impossible. My mother had passed away 2 years ago. I had buried her myself in a white coffin on a cold February day in Gallup. My knees buckled. I didn't answer. I couldn't. Can you hear me, sweetie? The voice asked. Don't look out the window. I looked anyway. The desert was pitch dark, the kind of dark that eats light. And then I saw it. Something moving along the ridgeline just past the cacti. It wasn't walking. It was crawling. Long limbs bent the wrong way, dragging a body that looked too thin to be human, but too upright to be anything else. It stopped when I saw it. I dropped to the floor, heart beating in my ears like thunder. The voice on the radio kept speaking, softer now. You shouldn't have come alone, it said. You know how it finds people, don't you? I reached out and unplugged the radio, not switched it off. I unplugged it entirely. The tower went quiet again. My pulse didn't slow for hours. I tried to report it the next morning. I waited for the daily check-in and then hit the transmit button. Meseta Ridge to base. I have to report a possible visual anomaly at 07 hours last night. Unidentified shape on the northern ridge. I also received another anomalous voice transmission. This one impersonated a deceased family member. There was silence for a beat too long. Then, copy that, Meseta. Please clarify. Are you experiencing signs of auditory hallucinations? Extended isolation effects? It wasn't dismissive. Just cold. I'm not hallucinating, I snapped. I know what I heard. Copy. Logged. Recommendation: maintain hydration and rest. Stay inside tower at night. Avoid direct engagement. That was all. Avoid direct engagement. It struck me how clinical those words sounded. Like they'd heard something like this before. Like they knew. I started digging into the old ranger logs after that. I'd noticed a steel cabinet bolted to the floor beneath the cot. The key was taped under the sink. Inside were emergency supply packets, a flare gun, and 3 moldy binders. The third one was labeled simply, Transmissions Unverified. I flipped it open and found logs dating back to the 1970s. Most were incomplete, hand-scrawled entries barely legible, but one from 1994 stood out. Entry 61794 to 011 a.m. Third call received. Voice mimic daughter deceased. Subject advised me to burn the field journal. Shape seen circling tower. Radio unplugged. Will log further. There were other notes too. Redacted names. Phrases like auditory mimicry and contact threshold. One sentence had been underlined in red ink. It speaks in the voice you trust most. I slammed the binder shut. Suddenly, it wasn't just some creepy coincidence. It was a pattern. Something was here. Something that called. That evening, just after 6 p.m., I saw tracks below the tower. Fresh ones. They weren't boot prints. They were too long, narrow at the toes, deep at the heel. Almost like someone had been walking barefoot, but not human. The gait was off. Dragging, shuffling, something that didn't move quite right. I circled the perimeter and snapped a few pictures with my field camera. That's when I noticed the dead silence again. No birds, no insects, not even the wind. I went back inside and locked everything down. The sun sank behind the canyon wall like it was afraid of the night, and I waited. I knew the third call was coming. I didn't know what voice it would wear. Section 3. It came at 3:03 a.m. I had been lying awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the faint creak of the tower's beams shifting in the wind, except there was no wind. The radio was unplugged, turned away from me on the desk. Still I heard it, not from the speaker, from outside. Mesita Ridge, it called. A whisper just below the floorboards. So quiet I could almost pretend I hadn't heard it, except I had. I sat up, inching toward the center of the floor. The voice came again, slightly louder. Open the hatch. It was my voice again, calm, polite, just like I sounded during radio check-ins, but I was not speaking. Please, just a moment of your time. I reached into the cabinet and pulled out the flare gun. My fingers were slick with sweat. I'd never fired one before, but I knew how. Pull, aim, shoot. That was it. I didn't respond. I didn't move. A soft thunk echoed up the stairs, then another. The sound of something heavy, deliberate, ascending the spiral steps. Metal groaned beneath it. I moved to the window, cracked the curtain just slightly. The moon had returned that night, and silver light spilled across the desert floor. There was nothing out there, just ridges and scrub. Then I saw the shadow. Something was crouched beneath the platform, just under the tower, pressing itself flat to the ground like a predator waiting to spring. I couldn't see it clearly, but the shape was wrong. Shoulders too high, arms too long, a head cocked at an unnatural angle. My breath caught. "Let me in," it said again. No radio now, just words spoken in the open air, filtered up through metal and silence. I backed away, slowly, silently, praying it couldn't hear my heartbeat. The sound of metal footsteps stopped. Everything went quiet again. Then came the knock. 3 soft taps on the hatch door. I held the flare gun with both hands and didn't move. Nothing happened. 10 minutes passed, then 20. No more sounds, no more voices. Finally, after an hour, I crept back to the desk and turned on the field recorder. I clicked record, sat down, and spoke into it. Third call received, 3:03 a.m. Voice matched mine. Entity observed beneath tower. No physical entry attempted. Hatch locked. Shadow resembled humanoid crouch, disproportionate limbs. Knocked 3 times, waiting to determine next action. I ended the recording. Then I sat there in the dark, watching the floor, and I didn't sleep. By sunrise, I convinced myself to report everything in full. Not the clinical edited version I'd given before, the real thing. I waited until Ranger Doss came online. Mesita Ridge reporting in, I said. I've had 3 anomalous contacts, voice transmissions, external mimicry. Last night it wasn't on the radio. It was here, beneath the tower. A pause. Then Doss said, "Copy that. Stay where you are. Reinforcements in progress." Reinforcements. That was new. "How long?" I asked. 2 hours. Don't leave the tower. Don't engage. I repeated it to myself. Don't engage. I tried to hold on to that. I really did. But then I saw the second tower. It was around 9:45 a.m. I was scanning the northwestern ridge with binoculars, and there it was, an identical lookout tower, maybe a mile away. Same design, same structure, same metal spiral staircase, except I knew there wasn't supposed to be another tower anywhere near here. I'd seen all the maps. Mesita Ridge was alone. That was the whole point. I looked again, and that's when I saw me, standing on the balcony of the other tower, binoculars pressed to my eyes, staring directly at me. My knees nearly gave out. I lowered the lens. Nothing. Just scrubland and cliffs. The other tower was gone. Gone like it had never existed at all. I stumbled back from the window, breathing hard. I wasn't hallucinating. I knew I'd seen it. But who was I supposed to tell? Ranger Doss? The handbook didn't have a section on duplicated towers and doppelgangers. The reinforcements arrived at 12:38 p.m. 2 rangers in a white truck parked down below. I heard the horn honk twice. Relief flooded me. I scrambled down the stairs and waved at them. Then I stopped cold. It was the way they moved. Too still, too slow. They weren't looking around or scanning the horizon. They were both staring straight up at me, not blinking, not waving back. Then one of them raised a hand and motioned for me to come closer. But it wasn't a wave. It was the same 3-tap motion I'd heard on the hatch. Knock, knock, knock. I stepped back. The man, if that's what he was, grinned too wide. Mesita Ridge, he called. It's time to go. His voice was wrong. It was my voice. And then the other one spoke too. Don't you recognize us? Her voice was my mother's. I ran back up the stairs and locked the hatch. When I looked again, the truck was gone. No tire tracks, no dust, just empty space. The mimicry wasn't limited to sound anymore. It could shape itself into people, and it wanted me to trust it, to follow it, to join it. I didn't. Not yet. But something told me I'd run out of time soon. I didn't hear from Ranger Doss again. For the next 36 hours, the radio was silent. No check-ins, no static, nothing. The desert returned to that ancient, bone-dry hush. Even the birds didn't fly over Mesita Ridge anymore. On the second day of silence, I started preparing an emergency departure. I packed my gear, folded maps, triple-checked the remaining water reserves. But when I reached for the emergency log, the one with the marked evacuation route, I found something strange. The map was gone. In its place was a sheet of old paper, yellowed at the edges, torn from a journal. Written in uneven, slanted pencil was a single sentence. 3 voices, 3 doors, only one leads home. I turned the page over. Nothing. I didn't recognize the handwriting, and I certainly hadn't put it there. But I knew one thing for sure. I hadn't imagined it. I started digging again, searching the tower top to bottom, looking for anything the others before me might have left behind. At the bottom of the supply locker, behind a stack of expired water pouches, I found a false panel. Behind it, a tape recorder, covered in a thin layer of dust. There was a tape already inside. No label. I clicked play. At first, nothing. Then, static. Breathing. A man's voice, ragged and exhausted. Day 14. I heard her again last night. Same voice. Same damn knock. I didn't open the hatch. Not after what happened to Keller. A pause. The third call came again too. My own voice this time, saying I was locked outside, saying I needed help. It knew about my injury, even told me where I hid the flare gun. Another pause. Breathing. This place doesn't just listen, it remembers, it learns. I paused the tape and sat still for a long time. Who was Keller? Why hadn't any of this been in the ranger briefings? Why had I been sent here alone? Later that evening, I heard the footsteps again, slow, heavy, coming up the stairs just after sunset, but this time, no voice. Whoever or whatever it was just walked up and stood on the balcony. I heard the boards creak. Then the door handle turned once. Not hard, not aggressively, just testing. Then it turned again. Then silence. I held my breath and pressed myself against the wall, out of sight. I waited a full hour before moving again. And when I finally looked outside, there was nothing. But they'd left something on the railing, a single photograph. Weather-worn, edges curling. It was a shot of the tower from a distance, taken from below near the eastern ridge. And in the window, standing with one hand raised, was me, waving. Except I had never left the tower to take that photo, and I had never stood at that window in that pose. I flipped it over. On the back, written in the same slanted pencil, "You let it see you." My hands trembled. I knew then, I wasn't just being watched, I was being studied. The desert had a long memory. I remembered reading that somewhere, maybe in one of my course books. Something about how erosion revealed bones that were thousands of years old, how wind carved history into stone. But this place, it remembered people, their fears, their voices, their secrets. I started hearing the voices even when the radio was off. My father, who disappeared when I was 7. My roommate, who once confessed to seeing shadow people in his childhood. A woman I didn't know, whispering prayers in Navajo. Each voice came only once, always from a different corner of the tower. By nightfall, I couldn't tell which ones were real. That's when I found the door. It had been hidden behind the back wall of the tower, covered by a hanging map of wildfire zones. The door wasn't marked. It was just there, a narrow steel hatch with a heavy latch. I had never noticed it before. I opened it, thinking it might be a crawl space or wiring access. But beyond it was a steep staircase, downward, carved into the canyon wall. I don't know how long I stood there before I stepped inside. The air was colder than it should have been. It smelled of earth and time and damp cloth. As I descended, I noticed things carved into the stone. Not language. Marks, tallies, circles, spirals. At the base of the stairs, I found a small chamber. Candle stubs lined the corners. A ring of stones formed a rough circle at the center. And there, lying in the middle of the circle, was a field recorder just like mine. I picked it up and clicked play. Static. Then my voice is Mesita Ridge. Subject has descended below. The mimic is growing stronger. It is beginning to remember things I haven't told it. Dreams, fears, places I've never said aloud. I stopped the recording. I didn't remember making it. And yet, there I was, telling myself something I couldn't deny. I had gone too deep. I had stayed too long. I left the chamber and climbed back up the stairs, sealing the hidden door behind me. And I waited. The third call hadn't finished with me. Not yet. The final call came on the third night. It was exactly 3:33 a.m. I didn't hear it through the radio. I didn't hear it outside. I heard it inside the tower. A voice called out from the opposite side of the room, behind the locked supply cabinet. It spoke in my voice again, but this time there was a difference, a slowness, as if it was trying to remember how to be me. Please, it said. You're hurting. I can help. Let me in. I stayed where I was, frozen in the chair. The only light came from the solar lantern, casting slow, flickering shadows across the floor. The flare gun sat on the desk beside me, unused, useless. I didn't answer. I couldn't. The voice changed. Now it was my sister's, soft and small, from when she was only 8. I miss you, she said. Come outside. I brought your old jacket. I nearly moved. But I didn't. And then came the last voice, the one I couldn't ignore, my own again, but not from across the room. This time it came from behind me. Hey, it said gently. I don't know what you've seen, but I do know one thing. I turned slowly in the chair. No one was there. I'm you, it said. I'm the part that wanted to leave. I've been trying to help. I've been warning you. The thing you've been hearing isn't outside. The words turned to a whisper. It's already in the tower. I dropped the flare gun. It rolled across the floor and struck the hatch. At that moment, I understood something awful. There weren't 3 separate calls. They were invitations, 3 chances to let it in. The first, a stranger's voice, harmless, curious. The second, a familiar one, comforting, believable. The third, mine. I backed away from the hatch as the knocking resumed. 3 taps, always 3. But they didn't come from below anymore. They came from inside the walls. I grabbed the flare gun again and moved toward the hatch, not to open it, but to barricade it. I wedged the desk against it, piled everything heavy I could find. The knocking stopped. Then the room changed, not physically, but perceptibly. The air thickened. The corners darkened. The walls seemed to lean. And from the radio, silent for 2 days, came a voice. Not distorted, not whispering, clear, precise. Transmission complete, entity bound. I stared at the speaker. Then I heard something shift behind me. I turned. The tower door, the main one, not the hatch, was open. Not broken, just open. And standing in the doorway was me. Exactly me. Same clothes, same face, same small scar above the brow, except his eyes, they didn't blink. He stepped inside slowly, and I could hear my own voice say, "You've been so afraid of letting me in." He walked closer, calm, not aggressive, not predatory, almost sad. "But I'm not here to hurt you," he said. "What are you?" I asked. He smiled. "I'm the echo." He stepped closer. "I'm what this place keeps, a reflection that deepens. I don't replace, I don't erase, I remember." He held out a hand. "You can stay," he said, "or you can go. But either way, you'll leave something behind." I didn't speak. He took a step back. "3 doors," he said. "One leads home. You choose." He vanished. I blinked, and the room was full of fog. Not smoke, not dust. Fog. 3 doors stood before me, all identical, all glowing slightly around the edges, one red, one yellow, one blue. I don't know how I knew, but I was certain this wasn't metaphor. This wasn't a dream. One door would take me back. The other two, I picked blue. When I opened it, I felt wind and light and sound. I woke on the canyon trail 2 miles from the tower, face down in the dust, my pack beside me, the flare gun empty, no injuries, no bruises, but my field recorder was missing, and so was the photograph. When I finally made it to the ranger station, no one greeted me. The place was open, lights on, coffee half full in the pot, but no one there. Just a single note on the desk, written in pencil. Welcome back. Don't turn around. I didn't. I walked outside and didn't stop until I was back in the truck I'd parked days ago at the trailhead. It started on the first try, but the radio, just static. That night I lay in a motel bed 100 miles from Mesita Ridge, but I didn't sleep, because every few minutes my phone lit up. Unknown number, no ringtone, no voicemail, just a missed call. Each time stamped 3:13 a.m. I didn't go home right away. I drove north through Flagstaff, then west toward the California border, stopping at a small roadside motel in Kingman. I used cash, no name, no ID, just instinct. But the calls kept coming, no number, no caller ID, always around 3 a.m. I never answered. One night, though, I listened to a voicemail. It was static at first. Then a voice, mine again, softer this time, like I was trying to comfort myself. You didn't choose wrong, it said. You're just still here. I threw the phone into the motel sink, turned the tap on, and watched as the screen flickered under the water. But it didn't stop, because the knock came next. 3 soft taps on the motel door, then silence. I didn't move. The next morning I found 3 pebbles arranged on the doormat, red, yellow, blue. I finally returned to my apartment 2 weeks later. It felt smaller than I remembered, dimmer, everything coated in a fine layer of dust, even though I'd only been gone a month. I opened the windows, I turned on music, I tried to resume my old life, but something was wrong. Things were off. Emails I didn't remember writing were in my outbox, photos on my phone from places I hadn't visited. My toothbrush was wet, and in the mirror, sometimes, just for a flicker, I'd catch my reflection blink after I did. The worst was the voice recorder. It had been in my drawer before I left. I hadn't taken it to the fire tower, and yet it now held a single recording. I played it once. It was a conversation between 2 people. One voice was mine. The other sounded like me too, but deeper, worn. They were talking about leaving the tower and what would happen if one of them got out. I deleted the file, but every morning it was back. People began asking if I was okay. I told them yes. I smiled, I laughed at jokes, I sat through lectures and nodded when appropriate, but I wasn't really there. Not all of me, because something had stayed behind. I'd read once that deserts act like memory traps. That sound carries far and long because of the dry air and flat land, that a whisper at dusk can travel for miles. What they never said was that sometimes the desert whispers back, and sometimes it doesn't give back what it took. Weeks passed. Then came the knock, not at 3 a.m. this time. It came at 30:33 in the afternoon. Broad daylight. 3 knocks, soft, polite, like a neighbor or a mail carrier. I looked through the peephole. No one. I opened the door against every instinct, and on the doorstep sat a small package, unmarked, wrapped in brown paper, inside a cassette tape and a folded note. Written in pencil, "You're almost done remembering. One more door." I don't own a tape player, but when I set the cassette down on the table, I heard it spin, by itself, and my own voice whispered into the room, "This time, you're the call." I left the city that night. I drove for hours without direction. Eventually, I found myself back in the Four Corners area, not at Mesita Ridge, but somewhere like it. A fire road, a watch station, a dry canyon split by dusk, the same smell of dust and sage and old wind. I pulled over and stepped outside, and in the stillness I called out, "Who are you?" Silence. Then my own voice replied, clear, loud, right behind me, echo. I turned. There was no one there, just my shadow. But it didn't move when I did. It stood still, watching me. I don't remember getting back into the truck. I don't remember driving away. But I woke the next morning back in my apartment, dust on my boots, cassette in my pocket. No note this time, only the sense that something had ended, or maybe begun. People ask me why I don't go into the wilderness anymore. I tell them I've seen enough. But the truth is, I'm afraid I'll hear myself again. Afraid I'll answer. Afraid I'll choose the wrong door this time. I've learned something about echoes. They don't just bounce, they grow. They become fuller, sharper, more real than the original. And in some places, they don't die. They wait to be heard, to be believed, to be let in. And if you listen too closely, you might not come back as yourself or at all. Conclusion, 300 words. It's been over a year since I left Mesita Ridge, and even now, I check the clock every night around 3:30 a.m. Sometimes I wake just before the knocks. Sometimes I don't sleep at all. What happened out there wasn't just an isolated event. It was an intersection of memory, fear, and something older than understanding. Something that knows how to wear your voice. Something that has all the time in the world to wait for a moment of weakness. I've changed since that summer. I avoid mirrors. I don't answer unknown numbers. And I never open the door after 3 knocks. I used to believe horror came from the outside, that monsters were beasts with claws and teeth, things you could see and run from. Now I know better. Sometimes the most dangerous creature is the one that knows your voice, your secrets, your doubts, the one that sounds like help when it calls your name, the one that sounds like you. So if you're ever alone in the desert or a forest or any place far from the world, pay attention to what you hear. Don't answer the first call. Don't believe the second. And for your own sake, never stay long enough for the third. Because once you do, once you let it echo back, there's no guarantee you'll be the one who returns. End of story. Good night.